Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 1 to 20. Chapter 1. Prologue. Become stronger. In this world, those who are weak will die. Who was it? A vicious battlefield. The last words a man gave me before dying. My whole body trembled after hearing those words. I couldn't remember the name of the man, but the words he spat out was still a vivid memory. 13 years old. After being thrown into the battlefield, I only sought to live. The enemies didn't care that I was young. They would cut my throat if they had the chance. So I was more desperate. I only thought about protecting my life. I carried the weapons left behind by the corpses and disciplined myself. I watched those fighting from a ditch, playing dead to survive on the battlefield and chewing on the flesh of isolated enemies. A young demon living alone in an unkind place like the demon world. The demon world was always at war, so I was always in the center of the battlefield. Time passed. My vision expanded and my steps became faster. Like one of those mountain-like fellows I used to look at, I wasn't weak anymore. Most demons were no match for me. Instead, they started to avoid me. I cut the throat of numerous enemies on the battlefield. Thus I climbed to the seat of Earl. Nobility. They were absolute beings that reigned at the top of the pyramid. I didn't feel any sensation of pleasure. The demon world was for the strong. All strong demons had a right to that position. It was natural for a strong person to occupy that seat. Stronger. This wasn't enough to satisfy me. Insufficient. I was thirsty. The demon world's 12 dukes and 4 grand dukes. They were my real targets. And if they fell, I could sit in the vacant devil's seat. My dream was to sit on that seat and laugh while no one can disobey me. Over time, I became quite famous in the demon world. I made a name as a powerhouse. My confidence and arrogance grew. I realized that there was another sky. I challenged the demon world's 4 grand dukes. But they were really strong. For the first time, I realized what a large difference there was. I evaded their eyes after losing the battle. So I hid my body in a remote area. Are you Randolph? A bleak land. It was a place where no signs of life could be seen. It was the first time someone had come here in days. I was hostile to the man who spoke. And the man laughed. I am the devil Death Bringer. I was lost for words. I've never met any devils, but I had certainly heard of the name Death Bringer. Randolph Brigzeal, I'm going to give you a chance. The last chance to be a devil. You are crazy. I spat out bitterly. The self-proclaimed devil was discussing himself. Even a dog passing by would laugh. But that didn't stop him from continuing. From now on, you are a player in a game I created of this world's destruction. More land, more humans being exterminated. Depending on the results, you might be able to become a devil. If you become the strongest in the demon world, then you will be able to take that glorious position. Devil. I had to swallow my saliva. What a sweet word. I didn't completely understand the game, but that one word fully captured my attention. I might have failed, but I still hadn't lost my dream. I had continued training in order to once again challenge the Grand Dukes. Of course, you also have the opportunity to refuse. The man looked at me with a smile full of cynicism. I have to ask this annoying thing. Now, what will you do? Nod if you want to be a devil. Conversely, if you shake your head, then I will disappear. The man looked at my head. I couldn't see a dare in his eyes. The moment his eyes lingered on me, I felt like my body was stripped naked. I couldn't move, like my entire body was in the clutches of a leviathan. I couldn't speak empty words. I never felt such a great presence from the Grand Dukes. All I could do was nod. And my mind became easy again once I nodded. Yes, there was no other option. So, when I came to, I was in a huge cave. And the result was that I couldn't become the devil. Of course, it was normal for things to be cut off in the process. I have no intention of reciting my long history of defeat. The last war ended with the destruction of the earth, and the devil was determined. Only the demon world survived, and Ariel ascended to the throne. No, I might be alive, but I would die soon. I've lost both arms and legs. In the end, I tried to solve everything alone and was greatly injured. I realized the limits of being alone far too late. Like a bug, your survival instinct surpasses most demons. The Grand Duke Ariel had told me with hate-filled eyes. I laughed bitterly. If I had a chance to survive, I would find the time to become stronger. That's how I managed to survive until now. But that seemed to have ended. My powerful survival instincts just led to my death. It was up to here? In the end, wasn't I just a stepping stone for the devil? Damn it, if I was given the opportunity again. Give me one more chance. Just as I was welcoming death, a white light covered me. I was confused for a moment, but I was able to know the identity of the light. It was the essence of the gods that lost. The planet Earth had become the arena for the demon competition. There were gods defending those places. Humans rejected them due to the rapid development of science, but the lost gods still loved them. They told me a very long story. I didn't respond to it, but I could understand one thing. Immediately after the story ended, I arrived on Earth and a woman nodding was visible. The moment the bright light completely soaked into my body. Occupation: Demon Earl, Dungeon Master, has been updated. The dignity of an Earl. 200,000 PT will be paid. An atrocious number of mana has been concentrated. A very large force is being constrained. The beginner's protection period, 240 days, has been applied. A high-level creature will randomly be summoned on the first floor of a dungeon. This creature will disappear after the beginner's protection period ends. Be careful, the creature summoned at random won't listen to the command of the dungeon master. I was able to return safely to the past. Chapter 2 to 4. Beginner's protection period. The message window that filled the air disappeared as I looked around. Really, back at the beginning, I was in a huge cave. The blue light flaring that represented a dungeon core was the only presence. The right arm that I had lost ages ago now remained in front of me. It couldn't be, yet there was only one meaning in this situation. I really came back to the past. It was unbelievable. Going back in time. Status window. I repeated it in my brain and a window rose in front of me. Name: Randolph. Surname: Brigzeal. Occupation: Demon Earl, Dungeon Master. Title: None. Stats: Strength 64, Intelligence 42, Agility 59, Stamina 72, Magic Power 50, Uniqueness: None. My abilities have gone back to the past. If my abilities were rolled back, then it is natural to think that I also returned to the past. I gripped my fists tightly and my eyes lit up. I have hope again. I was given a second chance. I had only one infinite desire when I was dying. My abilities were all at the initial stages, but I didn't regret it. Just being given the chance was sufficient. Besides, I remembered all the methods to become stronger. I won't lose again. I turned and looked at the dungeon core. A stone the size of an adult body and emitting blue light onto the rocks was the core of the dungeon. It was a treasure that had to be defended. I had lost it too quickly before. Now, I won't lose it no matter what happened. I had no intention of losing anything that was given to me. Swayak. Soon an even more intense blue light emerged from the core and formed a small image. Little by little, it took shape until it was finally completed. As I expected, the completed shape was like a translucent fairy. The palm-sized fairy spun around. It had a cute and adorable appearance, but the emerald hair and lantern eyes made it a beauty that couldn't be created with machines. After a while, the fairy nodded and landed in front of me. She bowed to my belly button. Hello, Dungeon Master. I am the Dungeon Master's companion fairy, Yee-hee. Yee-hee. Yee-hee laughed brightly, revealing her teeth. Yee-hee was her laugh. The name of a fairy that would be kept for their entire life was normally in this style. The owner of a clear mindset. I spoke sincerely. It has been a while. It is good to see you. Meeting Yee-hee again. It had been exactly 25 years. The fairy desperately did everything in order to help me. In the end, her effort was accepted without receiving anything in return. At the time, I had been obstinate and wanted to solve everything alone. Now I was different. I swear on the dungeon core, I will never lose Yee-hee again. Thank you for welcoming Yee-hee, Dungeon Master. Yee-hee waved a small wing. Although she was called a fairy, she was actually more like an insubstantial power relay. This was why Yee-hee named herself. But what do you mean by it has been a long time? Has Dungeon Master seen Yee-hee somewhere before? Yee-hee placed a finger to her lips while confused. Then her pink lips opened and she blinked her eyes. You just appeared. Is there any reason other than that? No matter how nice, I couldn't tell her anything. Fortunately, I hadn't become that soft. Yee-hee clapped her hands. Clap. Ah, that's right. Giving explanations to Dungeon Master is Yee-hee's mission. What are you wondering about? Yee-hee will tell you everything I know. Or do you want me to recite everything from the beginning? I didn't mind listening to Yi's long explanation. But I firmly shook my head. I already knew the contents and I needed to handle something quickly. The description is okay. Really? Yi said as she blinked her wide eyes. Isn't this a completely different world? Doesn't it have a different operating system? I can give a short and easy to understand explanation. Yi will explain it. She pouted as her wings flapped weakly. I understood her anxious attitude. A fairy was basically a chatterbox. Yi was no different 25 years ago. If I accepted, then she would be talking for several hours until her saliva dried up. I'm sorry, but there is no need. I understand. Her wings drooped. Then she sneaked a peek at me. She was trying to convince me to listen to her explanation with her attitude, but it didn't work. I will use the store. Pant, you know about the store? Have you prepared before coming here? No, no way. Yi jumped. She was starting to make a big fuss. This was the response that I had roughly expected from Yi. Yes, I can read minds. Wow, how amazing. Master, mind reading. So that's why an answer isn't necessary. Yi answered herself. Yi, she was the representative of simple ignorance. I will now open the store. Yi coughed a few times after settling down and then spat into her hand. Soon letters rose in the air. Welcome to the store of all things. A countless number of things were arranged under the message window. Points, PT, were necessary when purchasing. I currently had 200,000 point. I heard that the dukes and grand dukes started with a lot more points. There were things from common potions to very strong magic armor. Some were so expensive they needed millions of point. But I wasn't looking for an expensive item. My eyes scrolled through the store's list quickly. Then a list called skill books caught my eyes. If skill books were purchased and used, then skills could be learnt. It depended on the grade, but there were very interesting skills. More point were needed to learn high-level skills. How I regretted it during the time I lost the dungeon. Now I had gone back 25 years and could use the store again. There were thousands of skill books. The quantity was also limited. Very good skills often only had one skill book and an expensive price. Perhaps if I bought it, then it would disappear from the list of other demons. Among them were skill books that I wanted. All of these. I moved my finger faster. Skill combination, rare, far view, normal, magnification, normal, eyes closed tightly, normal, outstaring, normal, and calm, exceptional normal. Yi bit her fingers and made a "obbo" sound as I chose 6 skills. Master, shouldn't you carefully use your points? It is hard to earn points. Yi doesn't recommend this. All of them really aren't very great skills. Yi tried to dissuade me, but I had already clicked the buy button. Oh my god, 150,000 points combusted. Flop, Yi collapsed. She seemed to have received a big shock. She should be. A dungeon core would become stronger with their dungeon master and could help them receive the devil's seat. If the dungeon was kept until the finale, then they would be elevated a rank. Yet 150,000 flew away as soon as she started. It was natural to panic. Ying. There was something rolling around in an empty space. Like a whirlpool. It was the 6 skill books that I purchased. The learning method was very simple. Hold the desired skill book and say, learn. Skill combination, R, has been learnt. You can combine skills below the rare rating. Far view, N, has been learnt. Increasing the proficiency means you can see further. This was the skill learning process. I learnt the remaining skill books. But this was not the end. Skill combination. Please select the skills to combine. Far view, magnification, eyes closed tightly, outstaring and calm. Far view, magnification, eyes closed tightly, outstaring and calm has been selected. Are you sure you want to continue? I nodded my head. This much preparation should be enough. The highest grade of skill that could be combined was exceptional normal. Skills of the rare grade or higher couldn't be combined. Yi was drooling as she stared at me with tearful eyes. Her eyes were asking what I was doing. Skill combination looked good at first glance. I could obtain skills not sold in the store, but the odds were very low. A majority of the points would just fly away. In some cases, strange skills were created that made the person weaker. But, congratulations, unique skill. Mind's Eye has been made by combining 3 skills that pierced the heart. Unique rated skills can only be learned once. Congratulations on being the first person to combine a unique skill. 30,000 PT will be paid. My lips smiled. Mind's eye. It was a skill I wanted. I used 150,000 points to aim for this. The compensation was also okay. 30,000 PT wasn't a small reward for something that didn't give a title. That is ridiculous. Yi's voice was filled with astonishment. It seemed so unbelievable that her mouth dropped open. It was understandable. In some cases, the price of a unique skill book was more than 1 million points. Yi was also surprised that this unique skill cost 150,000 points. Once he opened the status window, the unique skill was added. Skill. Skill combination, R, can combine skills of the rare rating and below. Mind's eye can see the status window of the opponent. Hidden status, potential has been opened. There were only 2, but I was reassured. I used the status window to confirm the hidden status. There were some changes to the area below his stats. Name: Randolph. Surname: Briggseel. Occupation: Demon Earl. Dungeon Master. Title: None. Stats: Strength 64, Intelligence 42, Agility 59, Stamina 72, Magic Power 50, Potential 287 500ths. Uniqueness: None. Skill. Skill combination, R, Mind's Eye, U. Potential had been added. Skills had also been opened. I nodded with satisfaction. Potential represented the possibilities involved in my growth. I currently had 287 and the limit was 500. Once I raised all 5 stats to 100, the potential would be raised to the threshold of 500. Titles or good armor with stats was required to break through the limit. The Grand Dukes were the only ones who knew the method to break through the limit. Of course, the process wasn't necessary for me right now. This is good to start off with. Mind's Eye was a deceptive skill. Being able to see the opponent's status window was great, but it means nothing if that person doesn't have talent. A person who had the skill in his previous life was Duke Depella with 30 mouths. She liked to experiment with skill combination. Many of the points earned were used for skill combination. In the process, Depella coincidentally obtained Mind's Eye. It wasn't a secret because Duke Depella had a large mouth. Unfortunately, only one person could learn the unique skill. If someone else used the same combination, then Mind's Eye wouldn't appear. Duke Depella used Mind's Eye to make a very powerful army. She was a strong leader. The level of Duke Depella rose above the crowd. She received many benefits as a result. Duke Depella exchanged things with other demons and garnered quite a number of points. Those points were used to buy skill combinations. As a result, her dungeon became famous for being impregnable among humans. Even Grand Dukes who entered Duke Depella's dungeon would be injured. The level was enough to reach rank 2. It is worth pouring points into learning Mind's Eye. Duke Depella had recklessly used points and stats into abusing skill combinations, so she couldn't compare to the Grand Dukes. Still, Mind's Eye was a useful skill. Master. What magic is this? It is just magic. One of the most important skills had been secured. However, it hadn't ended yet. I searched through the list of stores. I now had 80,000 points remaining. They needed to be used for maximum efficiency. I need to raise my stats during the duration of the beginner's protection period. The beginner's protection period was 8 months. It wasn't pleasant, but he needed to be in the dungeon during that time. During the beginner's protection period, the dungeon master could only attack random creatures that appeared on the first floor. The number was small, but they were tough opponents. It was also true for other demons. In other words, the beginner's protection period applied to both humans and demons. For 8 months, the demons couldn't directly attack humans. A human warrior that appeared would need time to adapt to a dungeon. The demons could use this time in the dungeon to relax or plan. That was the beginner's protection period. I used 20,000 PT to buy an alarm spell. This skill was different as it used the magic of the dungeon core. If someone sneaked into the top floor of the dungeon, then the dungeon core would sound an alarm. It was an insurance in case someone accidentally invaded his dungeon while training. Of course, the possibility was close to 0, but it was in case something bad happened. Now lastly, training room ticket 20,000 PT on first use. The points will be consumed when used a second time. I bought access to a training room without hesitation. I only had the opportunity to stay in this room for 8 months. After the beginner's protection period ended, I would be too busy with new dungeons. Of course, that was on purpose. I need to obtain all the benefits possible within a dungeon. Unlike my previous life, the answer shall be at the end of the road. The training room. I felt at the moment I entered an abundance of mana. Just that fact alone made my body feel good. I looked around slowly. It was called a room, but this place was more like a maze. The narrow paths bent and divided into multiple paths like the roots of a tree. My goal was to see the end of this maze. In fact, this is the purpose. The training bonus. It could raise my stats very quickly. A weakened body would adapt and accept the original power properly. This was the concept of recovery. In that sense, a mana-rich room was the perfect place for me to regain my abilities. But rather than raising my stats, clearing the training room would give more desirable benefits. The room could raise my stats, but clearing it would give one reward. It was a title. In fact, this wasn't clear. I only heard about it from a story. Still, the odds of getting something was huge. I hoped to acquire a title, but points would also be good. A title is really tricky to obtain. A title was one of the ways to penetrate through blocked stats. It was possible to obtain multiple and duplicate titles, but in my past life, I only obtained 2. I survived until the end and still only got 2, so it was difficult to obtain. However, my potential had a wall blocking it. Then a title was a good existence for moments like that, especially for me. In the past, I couldn't raise my 5 stats to the threshold. I only achieved 93 points in stamina. The value was relatively low compared to the others, so I went through many troubles. I only used the training room a few times. I lost dungeons faster than anyone. Naturally, I couldn't take advantage of a long training. A roaring fire burned inside me. I swore to commit to this life. Anyway, a title could help me with the wall. Its importance was enough to mention it a few times. There were restrictions to wearing titles, but they could be duplicated. If someone didn't realize the significance of a title, then they wouldn't become stronger. It has been a while since I've seen this. The concentration of mana blocked me from all sides. A maze was a maze. It was packed so tightly that it was impossible to fly. And I confirmed the items held in the leather pouch hanging from my waist. If I wanted, I could return to this room at any time, but I vowed not to leave until it was cleared. Therefore, I used 10,000 PT to purchase a magic bag. I could put items in it up to 150 times the size of the bag. It could be everything, including food and water. Even a demon would starve after 8 months. I prepared more practical-oriented food instead of taste. It was enough if it could stop my hunger. I shut the leather pouch after checking the items. Let's run lightly first. The training room gave a challenge at each junction. I needed to complete the task at one of several branches in the path. I ran until the first branching point. After 3 hours, an enormous room emerged. Dozens of primary weapons were placed in the middle of the room. There seemed to be one of each type. Please choose your weapon. The message window popped up in the air. I chose an iron sword with no regrets. And the other weapons disappeared like a mirage. The mana in the area became agitated. There was a suspicious mana surge. Grr. Soon a number of cracks appeared in the space. The number seemed to reach 300. Get rid of the wolf-type crazy hound. 300 300ths. A demon could deal with these creatures with one finger. Crazy hound. But my stats were now restricted, so the number of creatures was dangerous. I used Mind's Eye to check their status window. Name: Crazy Hound. Stats: Strength 31, Intelligence 14, Agility 42, Stamina 34, Magic Power 9, Potential 130 130ths. Uniqueness: temporarily summoned to a room. Has an intense hostility towards Randolph Briggseel. Skill: Berserk, Normal. Mind's Eye can't read the description of the skill. But looking at the name of the skill and the name Crazy Hound, I could roughly imagine the effect. A mad dog running about. They were lacking abilities. The Crazy Hounds rushed towards me from all sides. Kerwong. I didn't become impatient and blocked from all directions. Then I strongly kicked the first Crazy Hound into another one. There was a hole in one direction and my sword headed in another direction. The time between attacking and defending was 0.1 seconds and I didn't make any errors. In a very short time, there was a large number of opponents, but it was simple to knock them out. Kaikong, Kai-Kai-Kong. The dead Crazy Hounds dissolved and scattered everywhere. They reverted back to mana. It was natural as they were summoned here in the first place with mana. The number of crazy hounds decreased rapidly. After getting rid of 100, the gap widened further and my sword indiscriminately moved between them. I appeared to be swinging at random, but the result was different. A crazy hound died with every stretch of my wrist. It took me approximately 10 minutes to eliminate all 300. Victory. You have exterminated all the creatures. Kukung. The status window that was floating closed and the stone walls moved. The total number was 5. I could take one of 5 paths. I guess I should decide the rules when moving. I chose the one on the very right. I would continue moving to the right when arriving at a blocked crossroad. Once my rule was established, I immediately moved forward holding the iron sword. So, you know, Yi has been thinking. As I walked forward, Yi sat on my left shoulder while babbling. An insubstantial fairy. The dungeon core hadn't been with me for a long time. I didn't ask any questions and created a unique combination skill. I caused a small amazement. There was a small thought. Ah, my ears. You are insulting Yi. Yi grabbed her ears. Later, Yi came up to my ears and started jabbering. Anyway, a unique skill is really hard to get. Totally expensive. I couldn't get it in my entire lifetime. Yet Master just sook, sak, bibiyeong, and it was created. So Yi clenched her fists tightly like she was pledging something. I give up on that idea. Yi tilde, and she just laughed foolishly. Yi shrugged her shoulders. It is a waste of time to worry about it. Is it wise to report something like this? Yi knew the meaning of words, but there was a giant, invisible wall standing between her being wise. How great. I blankly came up with an answer. Yi took it as a compliment and flapped her wings. Yi, she seemed to be in a good mood. Yi looked at my face for a moment and gave a silly laugh. And she rubbed her lips against my cheek. She had the body of a young fairy, but she was still a dungeon core. Therefore I didn't feel anything. I gently raised my hand to my shoulder as I walked. It was like driving a pesky mosquito away. Yi, who was bumped by the back of my hand, flew away screaming. I was inwardly glad to see Yi's behavior, but I had to train her from the beginning. Hing, so unfair. After a while, Yi grabbed my collar and complained. I raised my running speed. I had broken through 5 junctions. There was still a long way to go, but I needed to give my body a little rest. Just one more round until I take a break. Time was limited. I don't know if 8 months is good enough. However, it wasn't good to abuse my body. Doing that could possibly destroy it. There was no need to be unreasonable. I walked a little more and arrived at a junction. A message window instantly surfaced when I entered a huge room. Sit in meditation at the specified place. If you don't focus, then the time will be reset. I looked at the rectangular shape in the center of the room. The message indicated that I couldn't move my feet for 3 days. Anyway, I was glad that I could rest for 3 days. I don't know why I was asked to meditate, but it required mental concentration. I lightly sat on the ground. And I regretted it. 23 days. That was the time I spent in the meditation room. I spent 23 days on just meditation. Padudik. I grinded my teeth together. The slightest movement would release my spirit and reset time. The system that could recognize my mental state was like a scary ghost. I didn't know I had so many idle thoughts. Concentration was completely different. Not even concentration could empty my mind. The phrase in the message window was a trap. Therefore, I took 23 days. If my luck was bad, then I might have spent 8 months meditating. I heard about the training room 10 years later, so I didn't hear about everything. That any dungeon master could enter the training room. But the news only reached my ears after 10 years. By then, it was much more complicated. I can't lower my guard. I need to be a little more nervous. I thought it would be easy. It was necessary to be more tense. Beat my neck a few times. Prepare my mind so I could cope with anything that would emerge. Wield the sword 100,000 times. Do a headstand and move 50 laps around the room. Catch 10 of the madness rabbit. Endure the cursed state. Perhaps I don't have any luck. I had that thought after receiving the mission at the 80th junction. Once I reached over 90 and was approaching 100, I thought that this was karma. I laughed bitterly as I continued to explore the maze. There was still time left. 110, 120, 149. If I hadn't set a goal, then I would have abandoned it. I didn't give up after passing through room 149 but was forced to swallow my saliva the moment I entered room 150. The room only had one path. The end? Boss. Fight against the guardian Arkal. The end. My eyes flashed. Arkal was an armored creature 2 meters large. I rushed with all my strength towards Arkal. My stats had become incomparably stronger after traveling through 149 rooms. Finally, my sword managed to make Arkal collapse. Suddenly I was standing in front of the dungeon core. At the same time, a few message windows emerged. The training room's last boss Arkal has been defeated. The first training room has been cleared. The title, Indomitable Warrior, has been given. All branching points in the first training room has been surpassed. 300,000 PT will be paid. I finally cleared it after it almost reached 8 months. I closed my mouth firmly as message windows surfaced in the air. It was natural to check my status window afterwards. Name: Randolph. Surname: Brigzeal. Occupation: Demon Earl. Dungeon Master. Title: Indomitable Warrior. Exceptional Unique. All stats +2. Stats: Strength 76, +2, Intelligence 48, +2. Agility 72, +2, Stamina 80, +2. Magic Power 62, +2. Potential: 338 + 10/500ths. Uniqueness: none. Skill: Skill combination, R, Mind's Eye, U. Before and after comparison. Strength 64, Intelligence 42, Agility 59, Stamina 72, Magic 50, Potential 287 + 0/500ths. Strength 78, Intelligence 50, Agility 74, Stamina 82, Magic 64, Potential 338 + 10/500ths. Remarkable growth. The important thing was the title. Indomitable Warrior, an exceptionally unique title. Skills and items also had ratings like Normal, Rare, Unique, Epic and Legend. Among them, those with Exceptional after the rating was slightly superior. It didn't reach the Epic rating but it was superior to Unique. An Exceptional Unique rating. I had almost never heard of someone obtaining the Epic rating. Until the very end, however, Indomitable Warrior could be comparable to Epic. A title that increased all my stats. That in particular made it better. It was rare to find things that could enhance stats. I have a total of 348 stats. This was enough to make me confident about being at the forefront of the 72 demons. Is this the pleasure after all the suffering? A proverb I often heard from humans. It was like they said, the 300,000 PT was worth the 8 months of work. Now, my objective was achieved. The beginner's protection period was almost over. The points were also sufficient. I lightly nodded. It is time to strengthen the dungeon. Chapter 5-8. Easter Egg. March 14, 2016. People would never forget this day. 72 dungeons simultaneously appeared with no warning on this day. The dungeons were large enough to be seen with the naked eyes, so it was natural that they would block the sky. People were at a loss from the giant shadow. The scale was so unrivaled that they had no choice but to be overwhelmed. There were a number of assumptions such as an alien's house, the dwelling place of a god, a subterranean world, etc. In the end, some brave people were unable to overcome their curiosity. And most people who entered didn't come back. The survivors who returned from the dungeon alive trembled as they mentioned the monsters. Some people gained a mental illness and others committed suicide. Then an American man called John posted a video on YouTube. It was a video of inside the dungeon that John took with a mobile phone, and it caused a great shock to the world. The dungeon was filled with all types of creatures. They were monsters that didn't exist in this world. Any living thing was their enemy. The human body was simply torn apart in front of them. Is this CG? How terrible. This video isn't a composite image. There is also no CG. The Earth will perish in 2020. It is due to these monsters. The world was embroiled in unrest as unsanctioned information spread across every country. YouTube, SNS, blogs, personal broadcasting, newspapers, etc. Every type of media spread the topic. Doubts were raised as more days passed. Discord grew over time. After a lot of speculation, the United States Defense Minister gave an official announcement about the dungeon. There is a cave, a dungeon, a common place found in fantasy novels have emerged here. We mobilized state-of-the-art equipment in order to observe the inside of the dungeon but failed. No matter how small it is, the creatures inside will attack. Outside the dungeon, there is an invisible barrier that will invalidate all attacks. Gulp. A melting pot of tension. The story of the dungeons was a hot topic in 2016. Information about it started pouring in. The defense minister drank water and continued. We have dispatched the special forces to search inside a dungeon. However, firearms don't seem to work properly inside the dungeons. It is like the space is distorted as bullets won't fly in the desired direction and bombs won't explode. We were about to capture some weak creatures, but there was intervention from a strong presence. The strike was so quick that it wasn't visible. We were finally forced to retreat. All the reporters and people watching the video were surprised. It had been several months since the dungeons appeared. Yet it was surprising that the United States' first words mentioned retreat. More than anything, the fact that modern firearms didn't work inside the dungeons caused a real shock. The creatures were invincible inside the dungeon. Then, is there nothing we can do? Won't it be a big deal if they emerge outside? A reporter raised their hands and asked a question. The defense minister shook his head. The creatures are only tricky inside the dungeons. No matter how powerful they can't deal with modern weapons once they emerge outside. The weapons became useless inside the dungeons. They were able to obtain some data from the creatures after risking their lives. As a result, they concluded that they could kill the creatures outside the dungeon despite considerable damage. Guns were sufficient against the weak creatures. In contrast, there was a higher probability of a bullet hitting an ally inside the dungeon. So they didn't commit troops. Another reporter asked with a puzzled expression. Then are we letting the risk stay? The defense minister gave a shallow smile. Have you heard about a hero? In the East, they are known as brave people. Is that word being spoken these days? Yes, that's right. They are the only ones that can face the creatures in the dungeon. Dungeons had appeared. However, it wasn't just the dungeons. Heroes also emerged. In other words, they had awakened. They appeared at the same time as the dungeons. They called themselves heroes. Their physical state was outside the limit of normal humans. In particular, their attacks were fatal to the creatures. The creatures that didn't die from guns were easy to handle. More than anything else, the core will also give aid. It can even be called a philosopher's stone. Buzz. There was an uproar among the reporters. A philosopher's stone could be called a complete material. That's why it was strange that those words would emerge from the mouth of the defense minister. But they were forced to close their mouths as the defense minister continued. If they hunted a number of creatures, then a core would emerge. The core was the size of a baby's heart, but it contained considerable energy. It looked like a burning stone. And the conflagration would continue for some time. It also produced other energy. It could also be called new energy. If the core was sprayed on wounds, they would be healed without a trace, and pouring a little bit into water could cure illnesses. It could also enhance virility or make the body younger. This alone was worthy for it to be called a philosopher's stone. That is ridiculous. Very few people were aware of this fact. But today it was revealed to the world. At the same time, the reporters were puzzled. Why did he come forward with this information? The United States would have been able to obtain an astronomical amount of money with this information. But the United States thought differently. 72 dungeons existed. The secret would be exposed one day. They were determined to use it to take the initiative. Especially with the number of awakened slowly increasing. A secret society would continue to cause huge chaos. In fact, that was on everybody's lips at the moment. Humans were an easy race to turn evil. They produced a lot of problems in society. That was why the United States determined that they couldn't hide their rotten parts. They revealed the secrets of the core. We don't discriminate against the awakened from any area. We will treat everyone equally. The reason the United States did this was simple. It was in order to attract more awakened. At first they tried to destroy the dungeons, but soon realized the astronomical value of the cores. The value of the core was incomparable to oil. Nothing in the world could compare to the core. There was a limited number of dungeons, but the creatures were terrible. A lot of awakened were needed to obtain the cores. In the near future, if they were successful in their domestication, in addition to solving the world's energy problem, the human race might evolve further. The heroes would explore the dungeons and dig up the truth. The core at the end of the dungeon couldn't be compared to anything. This was an opportunity for the human race to reach the truth. At least they thought so. But is the core really a complete material? The reporters still couldn't trust those words. The defense minister laughed at this. We are willing to share the core we have. Any country can make a formal request for it. They can check the purpose of the core for themselves. The United States shared the core immediately after the press conference ended. It didn't take a long time to demonstrate the effect of the core. And this became the era of heroes. The end of the beginner's protection period is approaching. Immediately after breaking through the training room, I examined the internal situation of the dungeon using the dungeon core. Everything was empty except for the first floor, but I still needed to determine the status. I think the situation should be fine despite my neglect. I couldn't manage the domestic affairs when stuck in the training room. Looking at the status of the first floor, it seemed like it would endure for another few months. But I can't neglect it. There was a need to raise the dungeon guards and make them stronger. In order to do this, I needed to go through each floor organically. Domestic mode. Siam entered domestic mode. The dungeon core emitted a hologram. It was a small-sized model of the dungeon. There was a total of 31 floors and everything was empty except the first floor. In contrast, the first floor had countless small, blue dots. Some red dots were visible at the entrance, which meant humans had entered the dungeon. 32,144 kobolds. 87,112 goblins. 12,246 earthworms. Meat rats, around 400,000? That is too many. I need to reduce it. I needed to properly control the ecology of the dungeon. In particular, the meat rats were ferocious creatures that would attack all living things in the area due to hunger. They would even eat their own kin. There isn't a natural enemy. But the number can't increase. If the meat rats were installed on the first floor, then they would be the only creature remaining there. It was an unhealthy phenomenon. I pondered for a moment before asking Yi, who was snoozing on my shoulder. What is a predator of the meat rats? Whoop. Yes. Yi wasn't asleep. Wipe up your saliva. Yi wiped her drool with her hands. The predator of the meat rats? Yi knows this very well. Cats, snakes and weasels. A cat or weasel would be easily hunted by kobolds or goblins. I needed to take care of the physical relationships between different members of the ecosystem. What about snakes? I hoped for cheaper ones. The creatures would also cost dungeon points, especially when needing a considerable number of predators. I needed to release something that could suppress the meat rats. The cheapest ale snake costs 20 points. The ale snake was among the lowest grade of creatures. Instead, it could quickly adapt and assimilate into the surrounding environment. They were suitable rivals for the meat rats who had poor eyesight. They were also suitable opponents for brave warriors who entered. How many should I release? This is how Yi sees it. Wouldn't 1,000 solve the problem? That would cost 20,000 point. It was the value of a magic item. However, it was a necessary investment to preserve the ecology of the first floor. I'll buy 1,000 ale snakes. A message window came up at the same time. -1,000 ale snakes have been purchased for 20,000 point. Specify a location to release within the dungeon. Randomly on the first floor. -1,000 ale snakes have been randomly placed. As soon as the message window disappeared, the number of blue dots on the hologram increased. Purchasing large quantities of low-grade creatures was very efficient. Their intelligence was too low and they wouldn't follow the dungeon master's command. They would just proliferate and die. This investment was used to defend the dungeon from warriors. The first floor had been tidied up. Now it was time for the rest of the floors. I need to adjust the difficulty of the fourth floor to make it slightly trickier. This will allow the sense of accomplishment when getting stronger. Adventures, exploration, releasing a few magic goods will release more motivation to become stronger. I intended to help them on various fronts. A plan to cultivate the heroes. This was one of several plans I set up. The first step would be released right now. I tapped my forehead and started to worry about the positioning of the creatures. The difficulty couldn't climb too rapidly. The stairs needed to be placed step by step in order to be a benefit. If the difficulty increased too suddenly, then the heroes might not climb the dungeon or would wait until they became stronger. This would take too much time. In addition, I couldn't get the points if the creatures were too strong. The points invested could be reclaimed. I will mix a handful of orcs on the second floor. Their breeding rate means I don't need a lot of them. A few kobold and goblin leaders on the third floor. The leaders of the various creatures were more organized. I should be choosy. The leaders were much better than the others in their species. It was necessary to use points to buy them for complex tasks. 100,000 points will fly away in an instant. I bought them in bulk, so all the points seemed to evaporate in an instant. I had 240,722 PT, so I needed to save it as much as possible. The Demon World auction is held in 4 months. I need to buy things from there. It will be good to have more points. The Demon World held an auction once a year. The auction was held in the name of the Death Bringer. Precious items not sold in stores could be purchased at the auction. 240,000 points was insufficient for what I wanted to buy. At least 1 million points would be good. In particular, purchasing a half-dragon is necessary. Slaves were available at the Demon World's auction. Creatures purchased at the auction could be imported into the dungeon. Sometimes the guardian of the dungeon core would come out. The dungeon core was the most central and important thing in the dungeon. Of course, an outstanding guardian was required to defend it. A half-dragon had the blood of a dragon running through it. He was one of the guardians of a Grand Duke. He was renowned in his previous life as a demonic lancer who used a demonic spear. He was ranked in the top 10 of demon creatures. His strength could be felt through the skin. Krasla was one that especially killed humans brutally. He poured his boundless hatred towards humans. Cruel demons would watch him with eyes filled with admiration. He wielded a spear and took the lives of countless brave humans. That guy would be emerging in this auction. I couldn't remember the winning price, but it was considerable. 240,000 points was probably not good enough. A creature that is measured among the strong. If I could get my hands on Krasla, then I could get the first ranking. Even if I had to use all the points in my hand. He was violent, but all slaves had marks on them that wouldn't allow them to betray their masters. A guardian of a dungeon core would get plenty of exercise. I wish I can earn more points. I could get points if the creatures in the dungeon killed the heroes. But this was still the early days. Killing the weak warriors would only give a few points. Doesn't that mean I have to kill a lot of them? It would cause ridicule if I asked that question. I needed to wait for the golden goose to lay its egg. Can I achieve something right now? Accomplishing a significant achievement could gain points. Things like combining a unique skill combination for the first time or clearing out the training room. In addition, I needed to trade with some demons, but the 4 Grand Dukes are so hostile that demons won't want to do business with me. Beginner's Protection Period, Something like wiping out all the monsters on the first floor might emerge. I never heard stories about things obtained from the Beginner's Protection Period. This was a busy time where demons were adapting. But I could still gain achievements. Now my skills hadn't died. My bad lucks means something like a Black Warrior or Dark Knight might be summoned. Right now my skills were high-ranking among the demons. The effect of the performance and title from the training room was enough to make me even with a duke. Of course, they would become stronger as time passed, but I had the upper hand for now. I might not necessarily be first. The result at the beginning might not carry through. However, first-time achievements were valuable. It would give benefits. Dukes and Grand Dukes were in a different position and didn't need to think about their first floor being wiped out. Their capacity at the starting point was different from others. Of course, they could easily wipe out the randomly summoned monsters. If they didn't like adventures, then there would be no need to leave and other demons couldn't touch them. I need to do this in 15 days. There was no time left. The Beginner's Protection Period only lasted for 15 more days. I made the decision to exit domestic mode and move to the first floor of the dungeon. Kim Yong-woo. He was a starter who awakened at the same time that the dungeons appeared. South Korea had 5 famous starters. One of them was Kim Yong-woo. Of course, each of the awakened were different from the others. He settled on a dungeon invasion strategy where he could quickly build up wealth. Hunting for the cores that had astronomical value. He created a guild called Heaven's Will. The other 4 starters also operated their own guilds but came second to Heaven's Will. The inner circle of the guild could make use of the core. There were those with the jobs of blacksmiths or enchanters. They made weapons for easier dungeon hunting. They had sold weapons to other awakened and already accumulated assets worth billions of won. Life has reversed. He had only been awakened for 7 months. His previous life consisted of newspaper delivery, milk delivery and construction work. Now he was so wealthy, his guild owned a building in Gangnam. Yang Wu Ah, life is herbal medicine. Herbal, it is like a reversal on the ninth inning with 2 outs, ku. He experienced luxurious days he never dreamt about since awakening. Kim Yong-woo, he was one of the chosen characters. Heaven's will was named because he believed he was selected by the heavens. So what if there were 1,000 orphans? What was the big deal with college graduates? There were many in South Korea with money. He didn't know it before, but South Korea was a really good place to live when you have money. If you didn't have money, you wouldn't become anything. Every day he would ignore the people now under his feet. Swimming in private pools in the morning and hot nights spent with models. Every day was like that. Previously he wanted to die dozens of times a day. Now he was having fun on a daily basis. A laugh emerged from his mouth. Was this a difference in perception? A place that made people? Like a butterfly evolving from a caterpillar, he was a completely different existence. He even thought of the other awakened as insignificant. He truly believed that the heavens selected him. In South Korea, he was the king. Shit, but he was currently inside a dungeon. This place was in South Korea, but it wasn't South Korea. He could make tons of money from the creatures in the dungeon. Kim Yong-woo frowned at the wall. Blood was flowing down his thigh. His coat was ripped. The ripped cloth was tied tightly around his thigh. It would be nice if he had a potion created from a core, but right now he had nothing. He also had no weapons because he ran away and abandoned his colleagues. Those dogs, stupid assholes. All 12 members of the team except for himself had died. He didn't care that he was the only one alive. No, the real problem was the monster that attacked them. Rumors had drifted among the awakened. Stories of monsters in the dungeons with different standards. It was impossible to come back alive after encountering those monsters. Kim Yong-woo had laughed at them. He had entered dungeons dozens of times. He saw the same midget creatures every time. He was also confident in his abilities. He raised his stats more eagerly than anyone else. Even his sleeping time was reduced as he devoted himself. A large monster coming out. He never thought that way. Yet, today, the creatures had brought a monster. It was a situation where they aggroed it. Kim Yong-woo's confidence was shattered. The 12 team members were torn apart like paper. Huck. Just visualizing it caused him to gasp quickly. This wasn't a rumor-inflated delusion. It was the real thing. It wasn't overrated but underestimated. He was like a beggar. Wasn't keeping his life like winning the lottery? However, the possibility of that was low. He ran away without looking back, but he ended up heading deeper into the dungeon. In a sense, it was like there was still a stranglehold around his neck. I was selected. Heaven's choice. Kim Yong-woo gritted his teeth together. And shuddered. He was selected so he couldn't die. That's right. This was an ordeal from the heavens. The heavens had placed trials for humans to defeat. It was impossible that he wouldn't pass the trials. Grr. At the same time, his body became paralyzed from fear. Kim Yong-woo slowly turned his head. Saliva was dripping down. It had an appearance similar to a human, but it wasn't a human. Kim Yong-woo watched saliva drip down from the mouth of the monster dressed in black armor. This is a trial, so this is an illusion. No, I'm still dreaming. However, the reality hadn't changed. The humanoid monster in the armor was still there. It had fangs and nails sharp enough to pierce through skin. A monster outside the normal standards. A monster that wiped out the team. He never thought there would be 2 of them. Kim Yong-woo sensed his own death the moment he made eye contact with the creature. Please. The creature approached. Kim Yong-woo closed his eyes. Grr. The creature stopped a few steps from him. Then it didn't move for a while. Kim Yong-woo opened his shut eyes. Dark warriors, they are a bother. At the same time, he saw a man standing on the other side of the creature. He was good looking compared to the creature. A cold atmosphere could be felt from him. But he didn't seem as ferocious as the creature. He also had a sword at the waist. Nevertheless, he had a leisurely air around him. There was a reason why the creature wasn't jumping at the man. The man glanced at Kim Yong-woo. A guest has come? Ah, no, I. Kim Yong-woo spoke incoherent gibberish. It was different from his previous cursing attitude. He instinctively felt like begging. The man said nothing. He just stared at Kim Yong-woo with a expression. Still immature. What did he mean by immature? But Kim Jong-woo didn't ask any questions. There was no possibility of asking. He felt like the man viewed him as food, just like the monster. Grr. And he was ignored. The monster began to move gradually. Then the man pulled out his sword. Kim Jong-woo's eyes became as large as a lantern. Heroes with the blacksmith profession. They were able to use a core to smelt a sword. The core and iron was mixed together and a very powerful sword was born. The core would give off a smell. It was the scent of magic, but heroes with a strong affinity could smell it. Kim Jong-woo was an awakened that could smell the scent of magic. And the black sword was giving off a very intense smell. How can a core smell like this? Is there a blacksmith that can refine the core to that extent? There wasn't anything within his knowledge. He heard it was only possible with a rare grade skill. There was a rumor that an awakened in China had a skill of that rating. But that was an attack-related skill. There was no one with a rare secondary skill in smelting. Kim Jong-woo had gathered a considerable amount of information on each awakened. Kong. At that time, the battle began. The man attacked the creature with his sword. Oh my god. The sword sliced through previously impervious skin. But the attacks did not stop there. Kong. Kong. Ka-kong. Kim Jong-woo didn't even think of fleeing as he swallowed his saliva. The man's movement was more than he could imagine. His eyes couldn't see it properly. However, it was the same for the creature. Its head was targeted and it couldn't retreat. Only once. It felt like one attack would cause the creature to lose its head. The story has changed? Creatures with intelligence? Once again, there was no doubt about such a thing. But that didn't explain the man fighting the creature now. Kim Jong-woo felt a bigger shock than when he was awakened. It felt like he was being eaten by rough waves. He thought he was an elephant. Other humans were regarded as ants. Sometimes he would send curses to the ants. They might become heated up, but their level wasn't enough to fight him. An ant couldn't afford to anger an elephant. But Kim Jong-woo was like an ant in that man's eyes. If he was truly a chosen person, then that man wouldn't be in the same bracket. The tower that was supporting the man called Kim Jong-woo started to collapse. Quack. At that moment, the creature's right arm was cut off. The arm that was harder than steel was severed. Kung. The creature fell down on one knee. The man didn't hold back. He instantly placed his sword at the creature's neck. Degururu. The creature's head rolled towards Kim Jong-woo. Huop. Kim Jong-woo stared blankly at it with a shocked face and tried to retreat. But there was a wall behind him. There was no hole to fall back to. The creature that had been his foe had been alive just moments ago. Kim Jong-woo was so frightened that he probably wouldn't have noticed if he wet his pants. The death of the creature just increased his fear of dying. He sneaked a glance at the man. A pale face. His spirit couldn't calm down. He had to admit it. The man was an elephant. And he was considered an ant. He would die if stepped on. An elephant wouldn't feel remorse for killing an ant. Kim Jong-woo urgently tried to wake up his body after having that thought. He bowed with his forehead to the ground. Spare me. The man's eyes turned towards Kim Jong-woo. Now you can safely escape from the dungeon. Kim Jong-woo's body trembled and he felt like crying. Why, you will really spare me? Do you want me to kill you or something? Do you need money or? It would be better if I kill you right now. Kung. Kim Jong-woo bowed his head again. Spare me. The man clicked his tongue. Go before I change my mind. 3 seconds. 3, 2, thank you. Kim Jong-woo greatly humbled himself on the spot. Then he ran towards the entrance of the dungeon without looking back. The man gazed after him for a while with a hungry expression. Unbelievable achievement. All the monsters summoned for the protection of the beginners have been struck down. 100,000 PT will be paid. The end of a 15-day journey. I managed to complete it minutes before the beginner's protection period would end. It was almost too late. I shook my head as I checked the remaining time. There was only 3 minutes left. This time I was even forced to use my blood. It is unfortunate that I am not the first. Sweat was flowing down my forehead. I wanted it, but I hadn't expected to be the first one. 100,000 points is still a decent performance. The first person who achieved it probably got 150,000, approximately 200,000 points, so I regretted being a bit late. I cleaned it up neatly. But 100,000 points wasn't a small number. If the achievement window wasn't displayed, then someone else had received it. Achievements not open to the public. Achievements didn't exist indefinitely. The vast majority would disappear after being received 5 times. Therefore, most demons didn't disclose it unless to their faction. Humans or solo players wouldn't know about these achievements. That's why killing the creatures randomly produced during the beginner's protection period was half a guess. But I knew the approximate principal achievements. There was a high possibility I could get the related rewards. 3 minutes later, a message window flashed. The beginner's protection period is over. The total results of the 8 months. 4 achievements have been earned. The achievements gives a grand total of 1,250 points. Class 3 Easter egg has been opened. At first I was baffled by the phrase. Shouldn't the normal phrases about the beginner's protection period appear? Yet the 2 lines below that were unfamiliar. Furthermore, the Easter egg. I never heard of such a thing. I saw it for the first time. It was at that moment. Treasure of the Shadow Emperor has been opened. In the Mado era, magic had developed enough for dragon breeding. The Shadow Emperor was the worst and greediest tyrant of the Mado Empire. He was acknowledged as a god by the humans, and his vast legacy has been sleeping for thousands of years. Rewards list has been updated. You can select only 1 reward. Atasha's Sword, Epic, Strength Potion, Medium, King Ma Ryong's Horn, Homunculus, Cruel Army Commander. Warning: the heart of the Hell Monarch sleeping among the treasure has awakened. Warning: the Hell Monarch is trying to invade your soul. Kakaka, stupid gods, I waited for this point. I will be resurrected, quietly in this flesh. Wait a minute, this is the body of a mere demon. Kuik, an unknown soul has destroyed the Hell Monarch. The heart of the Hell Monarch has arrived safely. Reward selection has been completed. Cough. I grabbed the heart, pouring red blood, and collapsed to the ground. And my body started shaking like I had the chills. The heart disappeared into my body. Kakik, Ulkuk, numerous amounts of blood poured out of my mouth. Following that, blood flowed out of other pores, include my nose and eyes. The feeling of blood draining out of my body. My spirit couldn't endure it. It was like all the pain I've suffered in my life had combined right now. My body twitched like an earthworm. But I never let go of a thin lifeline. This occurred too fast to prepare for. The pain was only growing stronger. A shallow moan emerged from my mouth. It wasn't long before I lost consciousness. An unknown amount of time passed. I sighed heavily on the spot. The blood had been washed clean. The pain had disappeared like a lie. It felt like just a dream. I would have dismissed it as a dream except for Yi staring at me with anxious eyes. Master, are you okay? Did I fall down? It has been 3 days. Yi thought Master was dying. Sniffle. Foolish Master. Sea squirt, sea cucumber, sea anemone. Yi hit me in the side with a teary face and runny nose. But I had no time to take care of Yi. I shook my dizzy head and thought about the situation before I lost consciousness. Class 3 Easter egg, Heart of the Hell Monarch. I was looking the rewards list when the Heart of the Hell Monarch had appeared out of nowhere. It appeared and forcefully transplanted itself into my body. But the soul of the Hell Monarch had been extinguished for some reason. The only thing left behind was shuddering levels of pain. What happened to my body? But now my body was light. It couldn't be compared to before. I moved my body through multiple actions. Perhaps something might have changed to update my status window. I stopped my movements and opened the status window. Name: Randolph. Surname: Brigzeal. Occupation: Demon Earl. Dungeon Master. Title: Indomitable Warrior. XU. All stats +2. Stats: Strength 77, +2, Intelligence 63, +2. Agility 73, +2, Stamina 80, +2. Magic Power 82, +2. Potential: 375 + 10 500ths. Uniqueness: Heart of the Hell Monarch has been transplanted, full strength hasn't been fully opened. Skill: Skill combination, R, Mind's Eye, U. Before and after comparison: Strength 78, Intelligence 50, Agility 74, Stamina 82, Magic 64, Potential 338 + 10 500ths. Strength 79, Intelligence 65, Agility 75, Stamina 82, Magic 84, Potential 375 plus 10/500ths. Crazy. A sound emerged. I was surprised at the extent of the situation. My magic power and intelligence had risen significantly. 15 intelligence, 20 magic power. I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it directly. And there was still room to rise. If intelligence was high, then my speed at learning things would rise. Naturally, this meant that skill proficiency would also rise quickly. I could resist more statuses and skills. Magic power increased the destructive power of skills. No matter how good a skill was learnt, it was no use with low magic power. In addition, there was a close relationship with dominance. My charisma? Those two stats were inherently low for me. The stats were good, but they weren't easy to raise. However, that persistent problem was solved to some extent with the heart of the Hell Monarch. I'm grateful that I only need to raise intelligence a little more. An unexpected gift. It was different if I lost control of my body, but I had fully accepted the heart. There were many unknown things about the world, and this situation fit with it. I gave a smile. The condition to open it is clearing several achievements in the beginner's protection period. The score seen earlier was the grade based on the achievements. And the heart of the Hell Monarch popping up from the Easter egg was unexpected. A warning message had popped out twice. And there was a reason I was convinced of it. Compared to ones shown on the rewards list, the heart of the Hell Monarch is trash. Is this really a reward of the 3rd degree? The heart of the Hell Monarch was completely different from the epic Atasha's sword and King Ma Ryon's horn. I didn't believe that it would be the level 3 compensation. Either the heart of the Hell Monarch is a mistake or it has created a loophole in the system. I stiffened and my anxiety increased. Don't tell me I'm on an unexpected road? The transplant was already completed. If I tried to remove it, then I would surely die. I believe that the heart of the Hell Monarch intercepted the system. Doesn't that mean I had to accept the side effects? At any rate, it feels good. It was somewhat confusing, but this was an opportunity to become stronger in the future. The unexpected harvest made me feel good. Master? Yi blinked her eyes with confusion at the smile. The incident was settled after 3 days. I modified my plans for the future while reinforcing the dungeon. It needed to be re-established in accordance with my level. Points remaining. 324,579. I didn't earn any more points. I frowned when checking the points. When I last checked, I had 240,722 points. After adding 100,000 points, I had only earned 857 more points. The level of the humans are still too low. I have no choice but to work for more achievements. The only way to quickly earn points was with achievements. The heroes needed to be safely raised in the dungeon. The goose that would lay a golden egg was still young. The human I saw a few days ago didn't have bad potential for a human. I had seen a human a few days ago. The name was Kim Yong-woo. He was scared and looked clumsy, but the potential wasn't bad. There was enough growth potential. I used mind's eye to gaze at his status window. Name: Kim Yong-woo. Occupation: hero, warrior, title none. Stats: strength 38, intelligence 30, agility 36, stamina 34, magic 13, potential 150, 320 seconds. Uniqueness: Heaven's Will, Guild Master. Skill: basic swordsmanship, N. This potential was strong among humans. If he grew up quite a bit, then he would be able to hunt creatures alone. My memory couldn't recall a human with that name. There was no uniqueness, but his potential was enough. Heaven's Will. I've also heard of it. I placed my hand on my jaw and pondered. My memory wasn't bad, but it wasn't superior, of course. I couldn't remember everything from my past life. But the name Heaven's Will was familiar, so I searched through my memory. I contemplated for a while before nodding. My dungeon was in the territory between Korea and China. It was perched on the Bukhan Mountain. The dungeon wasn't resting on top of the Bukhan Mountain. It was floating in the air. An area of 21 square kilometers, height of 4,733 meters. In fact, it was more than double that size, but that was the extent visible to human eyes. Anyway, Heaven's Will was one of Korea's top 5 guilds. Their fame was limited to Korea because they hardly ever hit the dungeons around the world. Even so, I remember meeting the guild master of Heaven's Will. The most famous magician in the world, the Lightning Queen, was among the 10 strongest humans. Low and medium-ranked demons were unable to deal with her. The Lightning Queen had quite a number of specific enemies. There was a thrill when lightning thousands of meters large would strike the ground. In addition to the lightning, she had a strong army behind her. Riding the lightning was dangerous. I had seen her from a distance when she was fighting 12 people in a rage. I remember that heavens will contain powerful warriors. The guild master has changed? Kim Yong-woo's uniqueness showed that he was the guild master. Perhaps there was an incident that caused the guild master to be replaced. There is nothing left in this dungeon. The beginner's protection period was over. The work in this dungeon was roughly finished. The time has come to leave for the human world. I don't have the slightest intention of being stuck in this dungeon. Unlike my previous life, I don't think I will become strong from staying among the demons. I will mix among humans. The reason for doing this, because of the 4 Grand Dukes. They had insanely high pride, a strong belief in their own strength. It would be chaos if they mingled with humans, and they would never tolerate such a thing. One assassination attempt could cause a war that would last 10,000 years. In fact, they were impervious to assassination. Apart from me, all the 71 other demons belonged to the faction of one of the Grand Dukes. So I couldn't go against the Grand Dukes. If they shook things up, then Earth would be eliminated in 10 years. The problem was that the heroes became stronger and placed strong pressure on the demons over time. The demons were divided into 4 factions, but the humans were united. As a result, many demons were destroyed. But I was an existence that rose from the bottom. I directly killed an earl and took his spot. In other words, I was an irregular case. I had no restraints. Now is the perfect time. My face was known in my previous life. I couldn't try something like this. But this time was different. The humans hadn't seen me as a dungeon master. I am a hero. A demonic hero? It was ridiculous, but it wasn't a joke. A hero had high potential and could quickly build name recognition. I could also hit dungeons belonging to other demons. I would fly from behind or the front to augment my skills in the dungeon. It was the perfect plan where the borrowed knife did the killing. South Korea had many excellent heroes. There were heroes of many levels in this world of cramped landmasses. The name of the famous heroes were engraved in my head. After determining a plan, a location rose in my head. Let's go. Now it was time to go out into the real world. Chapter 9 to 11. Raid. The streets of Hongdae were filled with young people. A place filled with the passion and dream of many young men and women. At Café Imoa in the heart of Hongdae, 4 men and women were gathered. They were dressed differently, and the atmosphere they gave off was entirely different from a common person. They seemed like a combination that would rarely gather together, but they were all tied by one common thing. All of them were awakened. In addition, each one of them were starters and a guild master. If only this place was Paris. We could have gathered in Paris, and once the stores open. The woman in her mid-30s waved her hands. She was frowning slightly while talking about flying to Paris. Wavy, long hair and charming lips. The beauty spot above the nose and slightly droopy eyes gave her a glamorous type beauty. Then the bald man wearing sunglasses and sitting opposite her smiled and said, "I like the quiet." "Then why did you pick the middle of Hongdae?" "I don't like noise, but my favorite thing is the vibrant energy of young people." "Does Ms. Kim hate something like this?" The woman he called Ms. Kim was actually Kim Suk-soo. Kim Suk-soo clicked her tongue. "Well, I don't dislike money. By the way, why are we all gathered here?" "Heaven's will." The woman nodded as she roughly guessed the story. "Ah, it is about Kim Yong-woo. Didn't he go crazy? I heard that he is ranting nonsense every day about ants. He used to call me ant excrement." "Oh my, excrement is a little harsh." Kim Suk-soo giggled and laughed. Then a young man with blonde hair raised a coke to his lips and said, "Ajushi, don't humans become crazy every day?" Quickly cut to the chase. "I don't have time. I need to meet up with my team to decide a strategy to raid a dungeon." "Isn't the Mithril Guild closed?" Ajushi's information is slow. It resumed again yesterday. "The guild members are having a hard time. Those who perished in the Philippines. Curiosity killed the cat." The strong, young man knocked on the table. "Aish, don't you know that country was being ruined by creatures and a broker arranged for me to enter by boat?" I was clearly invited. Kim Suk-soo, who had been listening quietly, asked, "That reminds me, how is the area? I heard that martial law has been declared." "Newnham, don't even say it." Tanks are being called in. Ah, and do you know that the creatures that are killed outside the dungeons don't drop cores? Do you understand? Newnham equals respectful way for males to refer to older females. The young man's words were completely different from how he previously spoke to the man wearing sunglasses. He was a young man, so Kim Suk-soo was a difficult opponent for him. Really? That is really good news. Kim Suk-soo didn't have much of a reaction, so it seemed like she already knew. Exactly a week ago, large number of creatures came out from the dungeon in the Philippines. It was that there were 5,000 creatures. The civilians and awakened received damage, but after a few days, the military was organized and started to earnestly clean it up. It was natural considered the quality of the attack in the first place. But no cores dropped despite all the creatures killed. There was only one. There were numerous speculations, but the more reliable theory was that creatures needed to be killed in the dungeons. In other words, there was a close relationship between the dungeon and the core. Anyway, the awakened were glad to hear it. By the way, what is with those cat-like scratches? Didn't the tanks wipe them all out? Well, one of them got lucky. I don't know much. It must have been a strong creature. Newnham, can we stop this topic? I'm feeling awful. I'm sorry. Dongsang. Newnham was too short-sighted. Dongsang equals younger sibling, sometimes used to refer to a younger person who isn't related. Although he survived the raid, members of his guild had died, so he naturally felt sad. Unlike the United States, South Korea had no compensation for those who died in dungeons. All of the awakened that weren't in an institute had no choice but to go into the dungeon with nothing. Many of the rich and powerful showed an avid interest in the cores. If the guilds hadn't emerged, then the awakened in South Korea would have been their slaves. Let's return to business. There was silence until a mysterious woman spoke. She was a similar age to the young man, but she had a cold face. A tight skirt and blouse. She gave off the perfect impression of a cold city woman. I met an awakened. The young man complained after hearing the man in sunglasses' words. What about it? Those who haven't defeated creatures aren't real heroes. He took care of a monster beyond the normal standard all by himself. Isn't that an urban legend? No, a dungeon legend? Kim Suk-soo covered her mouth as she smiled. Omo, Dongsang, it is real. The monster. The young man made a shocked expression. Haven't they never been seen before? They exist. Dead people can't attend our meetings. Get down to business. Kim Suk-soo sighed. I'm not afraid of the Ice Princess. Hey, Alan, loosen up your expression. Don't you know that you will get a lot of wrinkles by the time you are my age? It appears one person has already heard the story. Alan and Kim Suk-soo stared at each other. The young man looked between them before sending a signal to Sunglasses. It asked him to proceed with the story. I've acquired information that indicates the awakened man is in Heaven's will. Hail, Ajushi, he is a real person? Kim Yong-woo wasn't talking nonsense. There was a moment of silence between the four of them. Handling a monster beyond the normal standards alone. If it was true, it would be an overwhelming fact. The presence of these monsters weren't just mere legend. All the people who had intelligence networks had classified it as Class 1 confidential information. The fact that they were reluctant to talk about it meant it was important information. These people gathered due to necessity. Everything was for the sake of profit. Defeating it alone? No way. You saw a phantom. Kim Suk-soo expressed her opinion. The young man also nodded. It might be different a few years later. But right now, it was widely accepted that none of the awakened could handle those type of monsters. It had only been 8 months since the awakened appeared. The starters were talented, but even they couldn't exceed the limits of time. Do you know why 12 people raids were created? Sunglasses asked politely. This time it was Ice Princess Alan who replied. In the worst case scenario, at least one person can flee. That's right. That number should have been sufficient to deal with standard creatures. Even 4 people are enough to kill kobolds and goblins. Everyone was silent. Sunglasses wasn't wrong. Humans had come up with the idea of a 12-people raid in the first place. And not long ago, Kim Yong-woo's group was completely destroyed. The 3 of them were silent. Except for the guild master Kim Yong-woo, the other 11 people had died in the dungeon. The only living person who returned was Kim Yong-woo. The standard of the creatures that could wipe out the raiding party wasn't normal. Kim Yong-woo returned alive, but he was babbling like a lunatic. He kept talking about an elephant that could handle the non-standard creature. He went crazy. You don't need to take him seriously. Kim Suk-soo clicked his tongue. Kim Yong-woo originally had a few screws loose. He seriously thought he was chosen by God. Kim Yong-woo's nature was enough to make them suspicious. I thought like that as well. Then why? Recently Kim Yong-woo's attitude has changed. His changed mindset makes him seem like an entirely new person. He even transferred a Bugatti Veyron to that guy. I think that Kim Yong-woo met this person in a dungeon before. Wait, is he human? That car? Really? He didn't just lend it for a moment? The man shook his head. People never saw Kim Yong-woo driving the Bugatti Veyron. On the other hand, that man was seen driving the Bugatti Veyron quite a bit. Then a little boy sitting to their right gave an astonished cry. Amazing. This is a special feeling. Tomorrow the sun will rise in the west. I recognize it. Kim Suk-soo and the other people felt their admiration increase. Kim Yong-woo was someone who was really stingy with his money. Despite controlling the funds of the guildhouse, he insisted on going Dutch when dining together with other people. He would only have a bowl of jjajangmyeon once a month, yet Kim Yong-woo gave a prized car to someone else. The Bugatti Veyron was widely considered to be the fastest car in the world. There were differing opinions that the Hennessy Venom GT was faster, but it was clearly a precious car in South Korea. The speed allowed in this place was very limited. Kim Yong-woo had been so prideful after he bought it that they were sick of it. Even if Alan asked him for a ride, he would blow her off like she was a fly. It really was like the sun rising in the west tomorrow. Sunglasses pulled his cool coffee closer and said, "Of course, I can't be sure. It is just a high possibility. And if he is the same person, he isn't someone who can handle a creature beyond the norm. Even if 100 awakened are gathered, they would find it impossible to handle the creature." At the time, Kim Yong-woo was the lone survivor, so he must have seen something. "Ajushi, aren't you worrying about needless things?" "No, it is clear that he has considerable skill. In addition, it is true that he bumped into a non-standard creature." "Hey, let's say he really did meet a non-standard monster? So how did he come back alive?" "I think he holds a rare grade skill. Therefore he could escape to the outside." Rare grade skill. They all swallowed their saliva. Just like the name, it was a rarity. At least it was in South Korea. The only known user of a rare skill was Chinese. Even the starters who woke up 8 months ago only had normal level skills. The man in sunglasses had an exceptional normal skill, improve muscle strength. Skills could be obtained through a particular type of work, certain actions against creatures, and completing difficult quests. Quests could be found on their own, but an updated list of quests also existed. Once a month, the quest list updated to coincide with the level of the awakened. Completing quests with difficulty levels 1 or 2 steps higher would give a skill. Sometimes a lot of luck and hard work was required. But hasn't he joined Heaven's Will? Ice Princess Alan said calmly. The 5 guilds had similar strengths. Respect was given to all sides. It was an unspoken law to not recruit members that had already joined a guild. The man raised his sunglasses. It is Kim Yong-woo alone who is making a fuss. They've never gone on a raid together. Then he can still be taken. Alan was convinced as she closed her eyes. She forgave him for calling this meeting of guild masters. Then the young man said with confusion, "Ajushi, I don't understand. Why are you telling us? Isn't it better if you alone monopolize him? We aren't amateurs. If there is any ill will." Sunglasses scratched the bridge of his nose. "I have failed. I was rejected before even speaking one word. I almost died." "Hey, even Ajushi fails at times. There are thousands of witnesses in the vicinity of the Heavens Will Guildhouse. They lose their appetite as soon as they see me." Is Ajushi really going to give up? You haven't looked at him. My head would have been rolling on the floor of the restaurant if I said even one word. The young man's expression became determined. There was something they implicitly agreed on. Sunglasses was the strongest among those gathered here. In addition, they knew how obsessed he was with becoming strong. He would get whatever he wanted. A boiling spirit that never admitted defeat. Their hairs started to stand up. If this was true, then they absolutely needed to recruit his talent. Even if they had to spend billions of won. Once he was drawn in, the balance between the 5 guilds would start to lean towards him. Maybe they could go up to the next floor. Obtaining the title of the first ones to arrive on the second floor was a great achievement. It was the authorization that indicated they were the best guild in Korea. Since America's official announcement, the existence of the Awakened was known to everyone. A lot of people made movements behind the scenes. Now it was a world of dungeons and Awakened. As the Awakened obtained more cores, the people were forced to rely on them even more. And having the title of the strongest would be very useful. I only want one thing. Information sharing about the rare skill. I don't want anything else. I will go first. The answer is yes. Alan stood up quickly. There was a red flush on her cheeks. Oh ho, it is already that time. I heard it well. I'm a yes. Kim Suk-soo followed suit. Ajushi, contact me separately. The young man was the last to leave. Sunglasses, who was left alone, leaned back in his chair and sighed. Really terrible eyes. He saw himself drop dead as soon as the other person glared. His breath became short as his spirit was lost. It felt like he was prying into a deep abyss. It seemed like a shower of sweat had flowed. His body trembled as he remembered those eyes. The sun at noon. I leisurely sat on a park bench and watched the people. Children were wandering around chatting, while it wasn't unusual to see the figure of a woman sweating. Peaceful. I was wearing rimmed sunglasses. Despite the existence of dungeons, they continued to live their normal lives. And if I didn't take any special actions, this peace would last for quite a long time. In my previous life, I randomly killed humans and the peace ended too quickly. The areas around the dungeon became a wasteland. The city became ruins. But now I would change that. It was unacceptable to step on anyone like I did in my previous life. If they didn't point a sword at me, then I wouldn't become hostile. For the moment, it doesn't feel bad. Wasn't I once dead? Now I was free. Maybe that's why I felt more generous. I never imagined in my previous life that I would be blending in with humans. But now I was stronger than in the past. No, to be precise, I have the potential to become stronger. So I don't care. The strong were free. That's why I decided to become a warrior above all others. I needed to make an effort to become a real warrior. I don't know much about humans in modern times. I couldn't read their culture and behavior at all. It was natural. I had no interest in them in my previous life. Humans were just the prey of the creatures, but now things were different. Humans were still peaceful, especially here in South Korea. Maybe it was because the threat of North Korea was stronger than that of the dungeons. Now I needed to pay attention to them. It was necessary to analyze and completely investigate them. So I spent time wandering and observing. It is easier thanks to Kim Yong-woo. I was able to save a lot of time. It happened suddenly when I emerged from the dungeon. A few pairs of eyes followed me as soon as I came out. They were Kim Yong-woo's hired messengers. He had drawn my outfit and rough appearance on a piece of paper, and they had been waiting for 2 weeks. His patience was worth praising. Everything became easier thanks to that. I met Kim Yong-woo at the guildhouse, and he proclaimed that he would be my subordinate. He worshipped me, and he knelt down and kissed my feet. The outrageous actions were all because I saved him. It had been shocking at the time. I didn't have anything to lose, so I humbly accepted. Kim Yong-woo seemed to be quite strong among the heroes. It wouldn't be bad to use him to accomplish my goal. I would be in a perfect position behind him. Receiving attention immediately wasn't desirable. Now that I have an ID, am I also a person from here? I took out my wallet and checked my identity. Kim Yong-woo had created an identity for him. My name and surname was still the same, but my status was listed as a returnee. When I was 9 years old, I left Korea for the United States and returned after graduating from Harvard University. Kim Yong-woo also graduated from Harvard in the United States. I was someone who didn't even receive a middle school education. So I didn't care about it. As long as my actions were free. Can I sit beside you? A woman I saw earlier came up to me and asked. I didn't turn my head, let alone answered, but the woman naturally sat next to me. She had been following me since I briefly stopped by Heavenswell in the morning. An annoying woman has come. I clicked my tongue. At first glance, she seemed familiar, like he had seen her before. She was different when I knew her, but she was obviously the guild master of the Timely Rain Guild. But I gazed at the status window just to be sure. Name: Alan. Occupation: hero, archer, title none. Stats: strength 25, intelligence 34, agility 47, stamina 23. Magic power 30. Potential. 169 400 firsts. Uniqueness. Timely Raw and Guild Master. Skill. Aim. N. Quick burst. N. Indeed, there was no doubt. The clear eyes, sharp nose and thin lips gave her a striking beauty that stood out. However, half of her face had been burned in a previous life. She was a terrible person who chased me more than anyone else. I could guess the reason why she chased after me. I was the cause behind the woman's burns. So, when my dungeon was on the verge of ruin, the dungeon core was being threatened, so I hired a fire creature to guard it, wounding the woman. Thanks to that, the woman and her guild considered me an enemy that couldn't live together under the same sky. They continued to chase me and pushed me to the brink several times. In the end, I was the winner but received intensive damage. It took me 1 year to recover. Our destiny has gone around. The timely Rain Guild Master had come to meet him. I could get rid of her but didn't. I had a hunch that things kept on moving around like a hamster wheel. If I didn't know about my previous life, the whole thing had now been initialized, so it was pointless to argue against it. If I joined hands, then I can figure out their intentions sooner or later. The woman flushed and lowered her gaze. I was using the full power of outstaring. I said lightly, "What do you want?" Then the ice-cold expression somewhat eased off. I talked first, so now I was waiting for a reply. Alan took out a business card from her shoulder bag. Then she smiled and handed me the business card. "Contact me." Alan's eyes remained beautifully curved at my reaction. This is referring to the eye smile that Koreans like. She got up and coyly stroked my shoulder. "Call, I'll be waiting." And she left without looking back. My forehead wrinkled as I was left alone. That human female, what was that? It was difficult to understand her intent. She visited just to give me a business card before departing? It was too inefficient. Why did she touch my shoulder before leaving? If she had a hostile attitude, then I could cope with it, but it wasn't apparent. Temptation? I don't know much about women. I had woken up on the battlefield. For 300 years, I only sought to become stronger. But one of the few things to be cautious of were beauties, especially on the battlefield. Those who held the beauties in their arms would be found dead the next day. Even the 4 Grand Dukes wouldn't think of playing that game. But it wasn't just the demon world. Just like demons liked slaughter, a succubus desired men and acted like battlefield scavengers. In my long life, those women were far away from me. The joy of becoming stronger was greater than sex. Of course, my body had some experiences. I still had a libido. If I didn't occasionally indulge his body, then my mental state would go out of control. But such acts were done without any kind of special feelings. There was no special senses from my side. I recognized it myself. I am the wrong person to use that type of method on. Of course, I was curious about why Alan gave me a business card but not enough to contact her. I abandoned the business card on the ground and stood up. If there was a business matter, then she would find me. If she didn't come, then I didn't need to go find her. Her potential was one of the highest among humans. Among all the people I've seen, she was among the top. Someone with no greed or false nature. If her talents were raised, then she would bloom like a flower. However, I became sure of her character in her previous life, so she won't easily follow me. There were also more constraints because she was a guild master. I needed people to follow me in my own raids. Truly an elite minority. A party that would automatically follow me in the future. Now I need some experience with what humans call a raid. Alan was moved to a corner of my brain as I walked in the direction of the parking lot. Titakak. In the early evening, a dark room. The only light came from the monitor. I slowly moved the mouse to operate the computer. I wasn't very familiar with the small screen and machine. In the past I had never used a computer, but I saw it a few times. I had become accustomed to it over the past few days, but I still felt uncomfortable using it. Duck, duck, dudick. My index finger tapped the keyboard. The typical stance of an eagle. It was ludicrous to think I could use it quickly when I only touched a computer a few days ago. It was to the extent that 300 strokes seemed to be used. I identified all the icons on the desktop. I adapted to the computer like cotton soaking up water. It was an indispensable necessity for people living in modern times, so I needed to learn it, even if it was by force. I need to look at an awakened online cafe to receive information about raids. Everyone had learned about the existence of the Awakened due to the announcement from the United States. their strength and supernatural powers. Many people were enthusiastic and bombarded the portal sites about them. It was the same with the awakened. The majority became aware of each other's existence and the awakened started to assemble. I heard from Kim Yong-woo that there was a cafe the awakened could subscribe to. The main portal site had articles associated with the awakened. Just pressing 3 letters on the keyboard would come up with the awakened as an associated search term. But the cafe where saints gathered wasn't something that could be found through a search. I pulled out a piece of paper from the wallet on my desk. A website address, ID and password was written on the white paper. Here, the English words on the piece of paper was typed into the address bar and a black screen appeared. The only thing present was the login box in the center. ID and password. I clicked OK and the background changed to the message, Randolph Briggseel Nim. I sincerely welcome you. Then a bulletin board unfolded. VIP. The VIP status was displayed in the top left corner. Kim Yong-woo didn't just give me an ID but also made sure I was authorized to view all the forums. I knew about it at the time. Usually a person would feel hesitant at this type of favor, but I was different. My style wasn't to decline anything given to me. However, I wouldn't receive it unconditionally. I gave him 1 core in return. It was a core he obtained from one of the random high-ranking creatures that appeared. Humans placed tremendous value on this core. It was the crystallization of pure mana. It didn't matter to demons and high-ranking creatures, but the ones could absorb the opponent's core to grow stronger. I intended to play an active role in the human world, so I pack away any mana before the creatures in the dungeon could get to it. It is good that I packed it. I know that I gave a core with a huge value. Actually, Kim Yong-woo had broken into a sweat when I gave him the core. He had a considerable amount of money in his bank account if I took into account his car. It was cleanly washed and worth at least 5 billion won. In fact, Kim Yong-woo thought that was lacking. The level of the awakened right now meant they couldn't kill the creature that would drop this level of core. It was an extremely rare item. Thanks to that, I could relax in this house. Did he sell it at the secret auction in San Francisco? Curiosity rose, but I soon turned it off. Money was readily available, and the economy and currency would collapse in approximately 15 years. Even if I could stop it, I wouldn't. A lot. My eyes turned to the screen again. The homepage was flooded with various posts. A significant amount of real-time articles caused a new page after just 1 minute. There were quite a few awakened subscribed. If I wanted to view a specific article, then I needed to find a separate forum. First I looked for basic information. There was basic information besides the names of each awakened. Some were locked, and when I clicked on them, a pop-up window stated that 100 points was required. I had 10 points. The information I required was easily accessible, so I didn't need a lot of points. The title was Dungeon Entrance Map. There was a reason why a dungeon master bought a map. The only person who knew the dungeon better than me was the fairy Yihi. I started to read the posts from the bottom. I want to know how much details are known. I was quickly disappointed. There wasn't any valuable information. It was an overview from the awakened about details of the creatures, how to obtain the core and basic quest information. I didn't need that information. However, the urgent announcements at the top had some value. Emergence of the ale snake. Please note that they have a strong attack venom that causes paralysis. Check the attached list for pictures. Close corner bracket. Recently the body of an awakened was found in the dungeon. Test results revealed that it was the result of an inside job. Please pay special attention to the other heroes on raids. A monster wave has started in China. Please click on the link for more information. Close corner bracket. A monster wave referred to incidents where creatures emerged from the dungeon. The official announcements warned the awakened of dangerous information. After checking other minor things, he clicked on the forums for those seeking raid members. People can be found here. Sometimes I had questioned it. There was always a schedule for the humans who entered my dungeon. It turns out they could find a raid party here when they wanted. I have to admit, this thing called the internet is useful. It was convenient. Hopefully I could handle everything that existed in this world. It really was a civilization of machines. The world ran on extreme imbalance. They were strangely ignorant but managed to use the mana to create tools to help them. There was a small posting on the forum that I examined closely. More than 35 stamina. 1 hero is required. I've already collected 2 magicians and archers. Beginners will be refused. Do you take direction well? Except for a few, all the posts had recruitment completed tags on them. There were new recruitment posts within 10 minutes. There is enormous competition. There were many demanding requirements with the recruitment. The minimum requirements for a raid always specified certain abilities and skills, and almost all of them refused beginners. Beginners referred to people who hadn't participated in a dungeon raid once. In that sense, I was also a beginner. I still have to send. After muttering those words, I sent a small note. The eagle-like tapping on the keyboard was used to appeal myself. Take me. I am strong. Kobolds and goblins aren't my opponent. A very subjective and objective note. I knew that I was strong. That alone should be sufficient. In case the other person failed to realize it, I wrote 3 clear sentences. But no matter how long I waited, there was no reply. They are full. New posts was constantly rising. I also sent messages to them. I'm sorry. Find another raid. Are you a king? I sent 29 notes in an hour and only received 3 replies. The reaction from all 3 wasn't good. Of course, I was well aware of the cause. The tone. There was something called etiquette on the internet. They couldn't see each other's faces here and needed to establish their identity. But I was someone who wouldn't even be polite to the dukes and grand dukes. I was on the battlefield as a child and learned harsh curses from my opponents. This was the language of a strong man. And I didn't want to. I wouldn't change my speech even if I was struck by lightning. My personality was made by nature and there was no way to change it. Wasn't it hardened after 300 years? One day I might be able to adapt, but that time wasn't now. Should I go on a raid with Heaven's Will? I shook my head. No, I can't give up. I am Randolph Brigzeal, and I sent messages to all the posts. One of them would eventually cave in. Besides, I wanted to see a raid from the bottom. I wanted to view my dungeon from the perspective of a complete beginner. In addition, I had a deep desire to find hidden talents. The name of heroes from my previous life. But they weren't the only strong ones. There were those with high potential who died in the early days. I was looking for people like them. At this time, a new article was posted. More than 33 stamina. Recruiting for a raid group will be open for 6 minutes. Please note, 8 people are required for the raid. I've recruited 6 heroes, so there is only 1 position left. I sent a note just like before. A reply arrived 3 minutes later. Randolph Nim? Do you have experience in a raid? Of course, I had experience with a dungeon. A lot of experience, but I've never participated in a raid. I pressed the keyboard with a bittersweet feeling. This is my first time for a raid. Well, what occupation are you? I contemplated for a moment before replying roughly. Close combat. I understand. These days there aren't many beginners who would send a note, so I feel like I should help. Going on a raid, tomorrow at lunchtime. Take exit 3 at Suyu Station and head to Street Cafe. Understood. Leave your number. Please text or call when you arrive. I was easily accepted. I sighed and leaned my body against the chair. I would feel more at ease fighting advanced creatures. Sending a simple note was almost like a war. In any case, my recruitment was completed. I would fight the creatures in a cool manner and the other side would get a good impression of me. Talk. The sound was coming from the clock on the wall. Kim Yong-woo had spent 4 to 5 billion won on a luxury villa in Cheongdam-dong for me. All the furniture and appliances were already in place. 114 pyong, unit of measurement. 5 rooms and 3 bathrooms. It was different from a castle, but everything I needed was stocked. I looked up at the ceiling. Everything was different now. I missed the company of Yi, but her spiritual body was unable to escape the dungeon. Of course, I could always summon myself back to the dungeon. However, if I did that, then it wouldn't be easy to adapt. I could return after I adapted. Anyway, it was clear I would adapt quickly. The difference would help eventually. I closed my eyes. This evening would be exceptionally long. Chapter 12 to 16. Deception. I wore a black suit, a tie and gelled back my hair. It was the traditional hairstyle referred to as a pomade. The suit and pomade was the perfect combination. Humans felt the need for a presentable appearance. I drove my car to an underground parking lot near the appointed place. I drove the car with a great deal of expertise. Of course, I had a driver's license. I only had it for 3 days. My field of concentration and memory was superior to humans. Once I became accustomed to driving the car, it wasn't that hard. After driving for 20 minutes, I arrived at Suyu Station. Once I took exit 3, there was the 2-story Way Cafe where the appointment would take place. There was no place to park, so I headed for a nearby paid parking lot. I drew a lot of attention the moment I walked into the cafe. Celebrity? Look, really cool. I naturally heard the conversation. My neat appearance also drew a good impression from the humans. My judgment wasn't wrong. My appearance wasn't lacking. I experienced similar things several times in the demon world. I only thought about getting stronger, but it seemed like the demon world had similar standards regarding beauty. Indeed, being a handsome man in the demon world wasn't that helpful. They could live comfortably if they caught the eye of a strong female demon. However, that would eventually end. Once abandoned, they would never be seen again. Every last one of them was miserable. Conversely, a beautiful woman was the strongest weapon itself. Some nobles highly valued the beautiful women in their harem. If they became sick, then compensation would be given. This was all unrelated to me, it was just idle thoughts. I pulled out my phone and called a number. There were a few rings before the other person picked up. Hello? A male voice. I asked carefully. Where is it? Who? Randolph. Right now I am on the first floor of the cafe. Ah, Randolph Nim. Come up to the second floor. I immediately climbed up the stairs. A man was waving his hand on the second floor. There were a few people gathered around his table. 7 of them. It seemed like I was the latest. The man put out his hand for a handshake and said, "Nice to meet you. I am the leader, Yoon Hyuk Soo." I used mind's eye to check Yoon Hyuk Soo's status window. Name: Yoon Hyuk Soo. Occupation: hero, garter, title: none. Stats: strength 31, intelligence 25, agility 28, stamina 33, magic power 27, potential 144 231st, uniqueness none, skill smash, N, track, N. There wasn't any specific potential. Tracking skills were a bit unusual, but it wasn't a big deal when considering the nature of the garter. I shook his hand and replied, Randolph Briggseel. Oh, are you perhaps a returnee? My skin was too bright compared to South Koreans. It was natural to think that I was a returnee. He was also determining the ranks. That's right, somehow that tone. Anyway, you are very handsome. Is that why the women's faces are turning red? Yoon Hyuk Soo slyly said as he turned his head. There were 3 women in the group. I turned towards them while avoiding their eyes. Pleased to meet you. Now, just sit down. I sat down on the empty seat. The atmosphere around the male members was a little uncomfortable. They were dressed in different clothes while I was the only one wearing a suit. Is it okay to enter the dungeon wearing a suit? One of the male crew members ended up saying. His eyes were glaring at me like I was the enemy. There was jealousy in that gaze. I could understand the situation immediately. They were only looking at the female members of the crew. The pretty women wearing makeup. It wasn't much, but they were decent beauties. This jealousy wasn't worth dealing with. The air became tense before Captain Yoon Hyuk Soo laughed and said, Haha, aren't we also going to change clothes? All the women here are wearing skirts. Come, let's introduce ourselves. I am the leader, Yoon Hyuk Soo. As you know from the forum, my occupation is a garter. You don't have to worry about getting aggro on you. Nice to meet you. Yoon Hyuk Soo turned his head to look at another member. The man sitting on the right side who had been smiling from the beginning then talked. I am Kim In Pil. My job deals with command magic. I can control the body of kobolds or goblins. Wah, there are also jobs like this? Everyone looked at Kim In Pil with surprise. I didn't see anything about a command magician on the Awakened website. It is because my day job before this was an undertaker. An undertaker was in charge of funeral homes. In some cases, their job would cause special conditions when awakening. But a command magician was certainly a rare occupation. The command magic could control dead bodies. I wasn't remotely interested in it. I immediately checked Kim In Pil's status window. Name: Kim In Pil. Occupation: hero, command magician, title: person who deals with corpses, XN, magic power +2. Stats: strength 16, intelligence 14, agility 13, stamina 14, magic power 45, +2. Potential: 121 275. Uniqueness. None. Skill. Body control, N. Uneven abilities. His physical abilities and intelligence was the worst, but magic was very high. Having high magic power wasn't always good. All fights required stamina. They would collapse after using one or two of his strongest spells. So it was better to have it even instead of one stat too high. I was somewhat unfamiliar with command magicians. I had seen specific professions like shamans or animal guardians. But this was the first time I saw a command magician that dealt with corpses. It was close to the ability of a demon. In fact, there were many creatures and demons with that ability. Of course, the skill was quite poor. At best, only a few kobolds and goblins could be moved. Title. There was only one thing to praise. Title. The rating was low, but I knew how hard it was to get a title. The exceptional rating attached to the normal title was the only thing I could praise. That's great. The eyes of the women shone. His occupation as an undertaker led to him becoming a command magician. People dreamed of making a big fortune in the dungeons. So it wouldn't hurt to follow a strong person. Huh, it's not a big deal. Kim in Pill laughed. The undersized build and laugh made him seem like a dwarf. The woman sitting next to the awakened that caused an uproar then introduced himself. Li Ji, hi. I am a magician that uses water skills. Nice to meet you. Kim Su Wan. A pleasure. Let's do well. Park Un Taek, a thief. The brief self-introduction meant it was finally my turn. I opened my mouth as all eyes turned towards me. Randolph Brigzeal. I have a close combat occupation. It was an incredibly short self-introduction. And I didn't even disclose my occupation. But it didn't matter. Other people were also reluctant to disclose their information. All of them could understand it. Close combat occupations should have high strength or stamina. Do you have more than 30 points in the two stats? Yoon Hyuk Soo asked. He needed reliable information for the raid. I replied positively. Both have more than 30 points. Oh, that is reassuring. Yoon Hyuk Soo said to the rest of the 7 members. Once again, I am the leader, Yoon Hyuk Soo. The dungeon is scheduled to begin this evening, so there will be a light briefing before that. Randolph Nim and Park Un Taek Nim are both beginners. Huh, beginners? Both of them? Even if this is a 12-people raid, isn't that a little dangerous? You don't have to worry. I will draw the aggro. This isn't a joke. I'm experienced enough that I'm confident I can handle any creatures in South Korea. I thought it was weird that he came wearing a suit. I suppose I will believe Captain Nim. Kim Su Wan gazed at me with a mocking look and laughed. He started off in a high position, so he was filled with arrogance. Yoon Hyuk Soo started sweating. I also knew the reason why Kim Su Wan was acting like this. It was sad, but a man still had an animal-like nature. The external conditions were excellent, but they still had an inferiority complex. I inwardly sighed. If things continued, then it could turn bad. The briefing lasted for 30 minutes and the atmosphere seemed to relax. Everyone, shall we go eat? I know a good restaurant near here. The briefing can continue there. I will pay. Wah, Captain Nim is amazing. In particular, the female members cheered warmly. Now it was time for lunch. They were also hungry. The briefing was boring, so they would rather eat. Yoon Hyuk Soo had a large smile as he talked. Who brought a car? My car is a bit dirty and can only hold one other person. The men raised their hands. 4. There were enough cars. Then let's drive our cars to the front. They were briefly dismissed. I shrugged as all the men looked confident. They were subtly check each other. It was the start of an invisible showdown. The women thought this was fun as they followed behind and talked among themselves. I walked slowly while checking their status windows. This is nothing. I was disappointed as I checked the status windows. Today seemed like a basic raid. There was no one with potential. But I needed to blend in and interact with them for a while. Eventually I would end up in a conflict with them. I would sweep through all of them from the bottom up. I would eventually find everything I need for my dungeon. Now I needed to learn more about the human heroes. In that sense, Heaven's Will was useless. They were affected by Kim Yong-woo and were nervous around me. The raids would already have a skewed framework. I was tired of those sort of raids from my previous life. I stopped for a moment. A car had suddenly stopped in front of me. An open-roof sports car. The stylish appearance made it seem quite expensive. The man in the driver's seat had a familiar face. He was one of the men seen in the cafe. His name was Kim Soo-won. The man who ruined the atmosphere. Did you fall well? The man laughed, revealing his teeth. I'll go first. Come slowly, or it is fine if you don't come at all. The man then stepped on his accelerator. Boong! The engine made a loud noise as the blue sports car sped off. I had to take a few moments to interpret the meaning of his words. Vanity. He is proud of the car. In short, he came just to show off his car. I didn't know the details of the car, but I knew what car I drove. Demons also boast about good rides. Our way of thinking is quite similar in that regard. One of the 12 dukes could command a dragon mount. The dragon was ridden on the battlefield. The breath pouring from the dragon could melt hundreds of demons. If such a thing appeared, then my power would be consolidated immediately. I had been very envious. I shrugged and then moved to the paid parking lot. Wah! Iron Man's car. There were cries as Kim Soo-won's car arrived. An Audi R8 V10 Plus. The car that the main character, Iron Man, Tony Stark drove. 0 to 100 in 3.6 seconds, 550 horsepower. The sports car that all men dreamed of. Kim Soo-won's expression was filled with confidence. Other cars arrived, but none of them could compare to Iron Man's car. I think my car is good, but there is no comparison. Yoon Hyuk-soo laughed. He seemed envious as he looked at Kim Soo-won. Haha, it isn't bad. Kim Soo-won cheekily replied. The increasing trend meant that cores were still expensive. One core smaller than the pinky finger was nearly 1 million won. Thanks to the United States announcement, the prices in the black market were far more expensive. Depending on the selling price, they could receive 10 or 20 times more for it. Now the market was stable, but the Iron Man car was over 200 million. Before the announcement, they would have needed to sell more than 200 cores to buy the car. Usually a raid had 8 to 12 people. If each of them took a share, then the amount would decrease. Kim Soo-won hadn't rested until he was able to buy the Iron Man car. An experienced dungeon hero, so they couldn't help but feel envious. Omo, the car is really good. One of the females approached and admired it. Haha, thank you. Kim Soo-won laughed straightforwardly. Your skill are really good. I've been on quite a few raids. We should go together sometimes. The two of us hunting? I will teach you the methods to get rid of the creatures. I'm jealous. I can only go to a dungeon once a week. The woman sighed. In fact, they couldn't enter the dungeons too much. Those in need of money would blindly jump in. Those who went into battle could obtain the cores and get lots of money. But going on a few raids would make them realize the reality. The world really wasn't easy. Any wrong move would kill them. Guilds existed, but they strictly screened people. The awakened with capabilities became the object of envy. Those lucky enough to live well could secure some safety. Once safety was secured, the dungeon would become a high-income job. Kim Soo-won captured the attention of the women. It was natural for women to be attracted to strong males. But their gazes were soon averted. Is someone really driving that in Korea? Yoon Hyuk-soo was really happy. A super sports car was approaching in front of him. What is that car? The woman interested in Kim Soo-won's car asked Yoon Hyuk-soo. The Bugatti Veyron. It is famous for being the fastest cars in the world. But the price is a monster. Wei-yu. Yoon Hyuk-soo whistled with envy. A 2015 model. It wasn't even on sale in South Korea yet. Yoon Hyuk-soo was a car fanatic, so he knew all about it. The fastest car in the world. But the Bugatti Veyron had an extra zero attached compared to the price of the Iron Man car. Kim Soo-won's car could be bought 10 times before reaching the price of that car. The Bugatti Veyron stopped near them. There was a question mark in everyone's head as the door opened. Gulp. Their faces all changed. The bodies trembled weakly with admiration. Only Kim Soo-won had an expression like he was chewing on shit. I'm a little late. The one who appeared was the returnee Randolph Briggseel. I smiled and knocked on Kim Soo-won's shoulder twice. That alone put an end to all communication. I was talking to Kim Soo-won. I didn't fall. Kim Soo-won's expression wrinkled even more. Where did you borrow this from? I received it as a gift. The Bugatti Veyron as a gift? Everybody stared with incredulous eyes. Even if he had attacked dungeons for 8 months, it was impossible to open the Bugatti Veyron. In other words, he was quite rich. They were puzzled about why a rich person would turn to the dungeons. But there was no further explanation. Everybody was overwhelmed by the sight and didn't ask any questions. And after a while, the beautiful woman admiring the car, the water magician Li Ji-hai, entered my car. The men who were secretly eyeing her looked like a fisherman who had lost a big catch. After eating lunch, the briefing ended. The majority of creatures that would appear were ale snakes, goblins, kobolds and meatbats. After receiving a few things to keep in mind, they arrived at the entrance of Bukhan Mountain. Yoon Hyuk-soo explained things as the group walked along the path. As you can see, that is the dungeon entrance. It is incredibly tall. Imagine a monster wave where thousands of creatures rush out from the entrance. Isn't it terrible? A monster wave caused considerable damage every time it occurred. The monster wave had killed hundreds of people in the Middle East, China and the Philippines. There was no law stating that a monster wave wouldn't occur in South Korea. If they were located near the entrance when a monster wave occurred, then it was 100% certain that they would die. Everyone who stepped into the dungeon took that risk. But there are soldiers near the city side, so it will be safer. The soldiers won't stop us from entering? Park Eun-taek asked. It was the first time a valid question had been asked about the dungeon. Yoon Hyuk-soo laughed bitterly. Of course they will pretend not to see us. Huh? Park Eun-taek sounded puzzled. The awakened can obtain the cores inside the dungeon. It is the next generation of energy that the government is willing to let people die to obtain it. Maybe a car that runs on a core would be developed in the near future? The core will be the electrical supply. Even revolutionizing medicine, sprinkled a powdered core on the wound would cure it. Even having a little bit of powdered core in a drink would cause slow recovery. It could even affect cancer and terminal illnesses. This was due to the properties of mana. Mana was essential. The original form would endlessly pour in health. The core was a collection of mana. There was an uproar in the medical community. The occupation of a doctor might soon disappear, especially as cores were bought in bulk for experiments. Supply was limited, so the demand for cores didn't diminish. Indeed, Park Eun-taek nodded as he understood. Yoon Hyuk-soo, who was in the lead, suddenly stopped. Anyway, can you see the building in front of the dungeon? It is a shop run by the Mithril Guild. Weapons and armor that stop the basic attacks from the monsters can be found there. A 2-story building had been constructed. It was 500 meters away from the dungeon. If a real monster wave occurred, then it would be the first place hit. The business was very big and contained lots of merchandise. Yoon Hyuk-soo went up to the armor and weapons displayed in the shop. I thought for a bit before renting an iron sword. It was a pretty good weapon. I put it on the counter where a man with glasses said, "Is this your first time?" "It is my first time. This is charged by hour. A deposit of 300,000 won will be received." I obediently took out the money from my wallet. "Can you prove your identity?" "Here." I showed the identification. He gave the sword back after verifying it. The salesman was tougher than I thought. After renting the necessary things, the 8 people stood at the entrance of the building. Yoon Hyuk-soo looked at me from the bottom up. "Randolph Nim, will you be fine getting dirty with blood?" I only rented a sword. I was still wearing the suit. The women wearing skirts had already changed into comfortable outfits. Thin padded clothes with body armor. But I shook my head. We wouldn't be spending a long time in the dungeon, so it was troublesome to change. I replied curtly, "I'm okay. Just this once." Yoon Hyuk-soo didn't really care. This was often the case with beginners. They would change their minds after experiencing the dungeon. Yoon Hyuk-soo handed out lights the size of a fist to all the crew members. "This will light up for 48 hours without charging. Be careful not to lose it because it is precious inside the dark dungeon. Then let's go." The entrance to the dungeon was 500 meters away from the building. It was close enough to be seen with the naked eye. Yoon Hyuk-soo spoke as the 8 people arrived at the entrance. "Do you remember your positions from the briefing? I will take aggro, the close combat professions in front." Each of them were given a position because on their occupation and abilities. It was more optimized compared to walking around randomly. Soon the entire raid group entered the dungeon. From now on, don't relax. We don't know where they will come from. Today we won't enter deep and will just wander around near here. Everyone was nervous as they looked around. They were a raid group that had just been hastily constructed today. Time was needed to practice. It would be difficult to enter deeply to fight the creatures. The square light shone brightly like a lamp rather than candlelight. It was bright enough for them to check the surroundings. But it couldn't be too bright because the creatures were likely to gather. The beginners should stick together, Hung. Park Un-taek said as he walked next to me. I nodded lightly in response. The young man had a timid appearance as his eyes seemed scared. Hung, aren't you afraid? It isn't scary. It really looks like it. I'm scared to die. I heard the kobolds are ugly and frightening. They're just kobolds. In a pyramid structure, the kobolds were slaves at the very bottom. They were a little mean but not very difficult opponents. Park Un-taek occasionally talked to me as we walked. Having a friendly conversation with his Hung was a method for him to relieve his anxiety. Park Un-taek paid no attention to my short answers. Wait, Yoon Hyuk-soo abruptly stopped. He brought his ear close to the ground and listened. It seemed like he heard a sound coming. Yoon Hyuk-soo stood up after 10 seconds. 2 creatures. Please wait while I go ahead and draw their attention. The goblins and kobolds were obstinate about targeting those they first saw. So the first one to attack would draw their aggro. Yoon Hyuk-soo briefly disappeared. The remaining people swallowed their saliva and looked ahead. No matter how good the heroes were, they only had one life. One mistake could cost them their lives, so they needed to be careful. Approximately 30 seconds later, the sound of someone running could be heard. There were several sounds. Yoon Hyuk-soo and 2 goblins. Prepare to fight. The warriors, including myself, stepped forward. The warrior Kim Soo-won. From behind, the archers and magicians were ready to fight. Park Un-taek holding a dagger was a thief and covered the gap between close-range and long-range attacks. Park Un-taek was new to dungeon exploration, so he licked his dry lips while clutching the dagger firmly. The command magician Kim In-pil was hiding in the back. There weren't any corpses, so all he could do was cheer. Kyok. The adult goblins were 1 meter in size and wielded threatening claws and teeth. The power of their strong jaw meant that flesh could be torn off. One mistake would be instant death. I gazed at the creatures while holding the sword. Soon the 2 goblins arrived. Water sphere. At the same time, the magician Li Ji-hai chanted a spell. A sphere of water quickly drifted from her hand. It was followed by arrows. Kahik. One of them was hit. But it didn't die. The bleeding goblin became frenzied and rushed forward. The guarder Yoon Hyuk-soo lifted his shield and stood in front of Kim Soo-won. I raised my sword and attacked moderately. I have to pretend. There is no meaning in coming here and not participating. Meanwhile, Park Un-taek stabbed a goblin and took its life. There was only one left now. It was surrounded and easily handled. The first hunt was successful. How was it? Can you do it? Yoon Hyuk-soo asked as he swept the sweat from his forehead. You handle aggro really well. I've participated in a few raids, so it is really noticeable. Kim Soo-won said as he gave a thumbs up. The aggro hadn't switched during the hunt. Yoon Hyuk-soo quickly turned his head away. This level of maintaining aggro wasn't enough to be called a genius. Yoon Hyuk-soo stood next to the corpse of a goblin and opened it with a sword. The heart was the size of a small pebble. Core. The size is okay. We will pick it up. It was a good start. The core from the other goblin was larger than average. Yoon Hyuk-soo recovered the 2 cores with glee before clapping his hands like he remembered something. Ah, that's right. Are the beginners okay? I'm fine. Park Un-taek stuttered. The dagger moved and gave a few direct blows. But it wasn't enough to be called a good performance. This was his first hunt, so he wanted to impress the group. I just shrugged my shoulders instead of answering. It felt strange attacking my dungeon, but it wasn't bad. This level of hunting was enough to let me know the general principles. There are still quite a few beginners. The raid group will die if they encounter the wrong opponent. Those with high potential could die when they were still beginners in the dungeon. But I inwardly shook my head. I can't lower the difficulty of the dungeon anymore. This section will be left alone. If a human with high potential dies to a goblin or kobold, then they aren't worth it. It was low enough. If I lowered it any more, then it would turn into pulp. No, it was hard to find any creatures lower than the goblins and kobolds. In this way, I participated in the raid, so I needed to look at it from the perspective of the raid members. The weak warriors who made it through a crisis would be helpful. Besides, it reminded me of when I was thrown on the battlefield. If they didn't an effort, then they would die under the pressure. I felt like that. Wei Yu, it is going smoothly. Yoon Hyuk-soo smiled pleasantly after defeating a few creatures. It had been 2 hours since entering the dungeon and they had already collected 13 cores. Each person had already earned more than 1 million won. There were smiles of all of the members' faces. The dead goblins moved slowly behind the party like zombies. This was the command magic of Kim in Pill. The way that they are moving. I looked at it curiously. At that time, Yoon Hyuk-soo said, "Wait a moment." They had been marching for 2 hours. It was time for a break. But there was no place to relax. They needed a place where they could notice the creatures approaching. But it was hard to find such places. Only experienced heroes would know such places. And there were people with a lot of experience in this raid group. The captain Yoon Hyuk-soo saw such a location. They could relax here in peace. The raid crew sat around and took a break. Haven't we gone in too deep? One of the women asked and Yoon Hyuk-soo shook his head. Do you think we've walked far? In fact, it wasn't that much. If we walk for 30 minutes then we can exit. Really? We've been circling around. Why? Are you afraid? The woman smiled awkwardly. Don't worry. Look at this. Yoon Hyuk-soo opened a leather pouch and his eyes shone as he looked at the cores. 13. Hoo. The size of each one means we can each get at least 200. This refers to price. Shouldn't Captain Nim receive more? The octahedral-shaped core would sell for 1.5 times more than the others. The captain was the one responsible for holding most of the aggro. Furthermore, he was in charge of all the preparations. Everybody recognized that he was exposed to the most risks. I have enough. Oh my god. The women were all excited. Hunting for 2 hours and receiving 200. This seldom ever happened. Luck was also a skill. Should we continue for a little more? Our breathing is fine. Can't we hunt up to 5 creatures without any difficulty? Yoon Hyuk-soo made a suggestion. It was a waste to stop here. They had already earned this much just on the first day. Suffering for a few hours could earn enough for a month. It was dangerous, but they were shaking with excitement at the thought of money. It was necessary to invest time. Okay, let's go. Everyone expressed their approval. I also had no reason to refuse. I nodded and the raid group rested for 10 more minutes before beginning to move. It had been 4 hours since they entered the dungeon. A significant number of creatures had been eliminated on this raid. Shall we go back now? I don't want to go any more than this. Kim Soo-won said uneasily. There was definitely a sense that they had entered too deeply. In addition, everyone was exhausted. They also needed to get rid of any creatures discovered on the way back. Yoon Hyuk-soo didn't refuse. Instead, he had a condition. Then I'll go forward and check one last time. How about it? Well, it is okay if it is the last time. We'll wait for you. Lure them properly. Yoon Hyuk-soo left with an easygoing smile while holding his shield. The raid group waited for Yoon Hyuk-soo like the previous times. However, time passed and Yoon Hyuk-soo didn't return. It had been 5 minutes. There was still no news. 10 minutes passed and they were all filled with anxiety. Why hasn't he come back yet? What do you think happened? The females were the first ones to react with anxiety. Kim Soo-won sighed. I will wait another 10 minutes. If he doesn't come back then we will return on our own. Are we going to abandon Captain Nim? Kim In-pil, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke. The command magician that had always been in the back suddenly came to the front. Captain Nim. 10 minutes have passed, but please wait another 10 minutes. Wasn't it posted on the website? Sometimes a chaser won't return for at least 15 minutes. A chaser has to wait, excite the creatures without being killed. It was possible to excite the creatures, but the smell of blood might lure even more. It was better to avoid such places. How can a person be so cruel? Be quiet or die. Kim Soo-won was a veteran. He had gone through this experience a few times. It was useless if they ended up dying as well. Time passed quickly. Everyone held their breaths as they waited for Yoon Hyuk-soo to return. And 10 minutes passed. Let's go. Just a little bit more. Wait a little longer, please. Kim In-pil tried, but public opinion was already on Kim Soo-won's side. Kim Soo-won refused coldly and turned his body away. I've waited a lot already. 10 minutes. No, 5 more minutes. Do you really like him? Kim In-pil bowed deeply. This is a request. He has been my friend for 10 years. My parents died when I was young and he is the only one I have left. I can't possibly abandon him. His eyes shone with tears. Can't we wait 5 more minutes? This matter is pitiful. G-hi-ssi, who? I understand. 5 more minutes. After that, we will go without any regrets. Do you understand? Kim Soo-won had already become the leader of the group. He was the most experienced one here. The other group members obediently followed Kim Soo-won's opinion. Thank you very much. Kim In-pil bowed his head several times. The group members were tired as they waited for Yoon Hyuk-soo. A person couldn't constantly maintain a tense state. Being tense consumed more energy than necessary. They became physically and mentally exhausted. The situation was like that now. They had been in a tense state for 4 hours and 20 minutes. Now it was difficult for them to even brandish a sword or fire arrows. When 5 minutes passed again, something is coming. Kim Soo-won was the first one to notice the abnormality. He leaned forward in the direction the sound was coming from. Then his expression changed. It crumpled. Crazy. He took 1 step back and cursed. Everybody was puzzled, but I could soon see why. Kirarik. Yoon Hyuk-soo was coming. He was followed by numerous creatures. Run. Where? The only ones who knew the geography of this place was Yoon Hyuk-soo and Kim Soo-won. But Yoon Hyuk-soo was being chased while Kim Soo-won was in a blank state. Then Kim In-pil ran towards Yoon Hyuk-soo, along with the corpses of the creatures killed during the raid. What should they do? The speed of the creatures wasn't that unusual. It was just impossible to escape when they were completely exhausted. Kim Soo-won looked back. 3 girls, 2 beginners. The situation right now. How could they escape the dungeon while being pursued by creatures? A pessimistic situation. The creatures were all excited. They would catch up persistently. On the other hand, Yoon Hyuk-soo and Kim In-pil were veterans. Survival was their only goal. There was no need look any further. Kim Soo-won abandoned the 5 people. He immediately ran towards Yoon Hyuk-soo and Kim In-pil. Wait a minute? One of the 2 beginners. The thief Park Eun-taek was surprised, but it was already too late. The women also looked devastated. This situation is fun. My mouth twisted. Weak humans were being culled. It was no different from the demon world. They didn't linger and coldly turned their backs. The conclusion of this would be a little interesting. Would they give up? This wasn't a play. It was the crossroads of survival. As a dungeon master, I saw a variety of situations, but this one felt different. It had a faint scent of nostalgia. Run away. I'll buy some time. A beginner. A thief. Every time I talked to him, he seemed like an innocent youth. Park Eun-taek grasped his dagger with trembling hands. I was impressed. Sacrifice. The 5 people couldn't even think about fighting. There was only a 1% chance. I didn't expect a sacrifice at all. It was natural. They had met for the first time today. It hadn't even been half a day since they met. Then to die for them? It was too unexpected. He gripped his fists tightly. A noble sacrifice? That was just a word for death. In other words, he was going to his death. Go, now. I'm sorry. Be careful. Huck. The 3 women turned away at Park Eun-taek's cry. They started to run back the way they came. The women knew. They left him here to die. I gave one last smile to Park Eun-taek before following. I could easily organize the situation now. But I didn't. I didn't feel the need. After all, they were intruders. They invaded my home without any authorization. Kim Yong-woo had value, but Park Eun-taek was different. He had low potential and low growth, so he wouldn't be any help to me. Well, it would be different if he did whatever it took to survive. Park Eun-taek moved with extreme sadness. But there was no chance. It was a short path and the creatures soon reached him. Park Eun-taek had inflicted attacks on creatures today, but it was only one at a time. His attacks were easily blocked. And the result was obvious. Quaduk, Kuu, Kuik. The 3 women with tears, runny noses and messy hair slumped down. They were half exhausted and could barely sustain their bodies. One of the girls sat down and buried her face in her knees. Another one was holding her chest while breathing roughly. The remaining female continued looking around. They had squeezed themselves to the limit in order to escape the swamp of death. Their legs couldn't run anymore. There was no conversation. They couldn't even afford to talk. If only time could stop, no, if they could go back to the past. The rest of the people, what happened to them? Li Ji-hai broke the silence. A magician had high intelligence, so she could calmly look at the situation. The other two women didn't answer. Everyone knew there would be a pessimistic answer if they opened their mouths. Particularly regarding Kim Soo-won and Kim In-pil. The two men had abandoned them. Perhaps, does anyone know where we are? Naturally, no one lifted their hands. The women didn't have a lot of experience with dungeons. They never thought about memorizing the terrain of the dungeon during the raid. Li Ji-hai looked closely at the faces of the remaining people. She just turned away from me. This was because she knew that I was a beginner to the dungeon. Of course, I actually knew the terrain of the dungeon. But I didn't raise a hand. My thoughts were the same as it was regarding Park Un-taek's situation. I would watch the situation and welcome any catastrophe. No, Li Ji-hai sighed. The area was dark. Apart from me, the others had all thrown away their lamps. They would turn off in the next few hours anyway. A plan. Let's focus on a plan. What plan? We're all going to die. I'm going to die. One woman was hysterical. Li Ji-hai was silent. She didn't say anything as the woman hysterically shouted at Li Ji-hai. You're the one who said to wait 5 more minutes. If you didn't, we would be out of the dungeon by now. Everything is your fault. So, what? The woman glared angrily. Whether she believed it or not, Li Ji-hai played dumb and had a brazen look on his face. It is already in the past. Or do you want to kill me? Shameless. If you don't want to kill me, then we should discuss what to do next so that we don't die. My head was busy as I watched Li Ji-hai acting coolly. I was remembering her potential. But the sight now couldn't be explained by mere potential or stats. Or was I mistaken? I took a deep breath and used mind's eye again. Name: Li Ji-hai. Occupation: hero, water magician, title: none. Stats: strength 22, intelligence 41, agility 18, stamina 26, magic power 35, potential 142 277, uniqueness none, skill water sphere N. I knew it. I wasn't mistaken. So what was her nature right now? She was acting cool and decisive. When we were all together, she had acted like a fish out of water. This person was suitable to be a manager. A person who managed and gave external support from outside during raids. My eyes sparkled. Good. I found an unexpected treasure. I thought I came here in vain but couldn't confirm that the clam actually held a pearl. I decided to keep an eye on her a little more. First, let's re-examine the path we came from. Could you please lend me a light? I silently handed her the light. She placed it down and used a rock to scratch the floor. The rock made a white line that showed the path they took. But this didn't continue. This was due to the fact that they were running away. No matter how good her memory was, she would eventually get blocked at some point. I can only remember up to here. Do you remember? The remaining 2 women were overwhelmed by Li Ji-hai. Li Ji-hai frowned and stared at the ground. Well, I think we can't use this path. Those creatures now have the taste of human flesh. They might still be alive, you know. Who? The 3 who abandoned us to run away. Or Park Un-taek SSI who blocked the creatures. Park Un-taek SSI might be alive. It was simply wishful thinking. All of them had heard Park Un-taek's screams. There was no possibility he was still alive. Only one. We don't know the way back even if he is still alive. We could also meet the creatures. I don't want to go back that way. Li Ji-hai was adamant. The woman who talked before finally asked. Then what is that thing on the ground? A map. We need to understand the geography of the area nearby before we start moving. It would be nice if there was pen and paper, but I need to use the ground. She explained her private intentions. I'm perfectly aware of the terrain near the entrance of the dungeon. If a similar terrain appears, what if we end up going deeper? I had been watching in silence, but now I asked a question. It was more likely to enter the depths of the dungeon rather than the entrance. Li Ji-hai carefully explained. There is a creature called the meat bat. Sometimes we would see it flying. The meat bats actually had the highest population in the dungeon. They mainly ate the bodies of goblins and kobolds. They would only attack humans when they were really hungry, or when their territory was invaded. Yes, the meat bats tend to sleep off large meals in the morning and gravitates towards the entrance in the evening. They have such a habit? There are many bugs at the entrance. They learn to hunt by catching the bugs. That's right, the dungeons were places that suddenly emerged. Initially there were living beings that lived in that area. Naturally, bugs from the outside were introduced into the dungeons. It was a natural phenomenon for bugs to be found on both sides of the dungeon entrance. Besides, the creatures couldn't escape from the dungeon without the permission of the dungeon master. That's why they were found at the entrance. It was great that Li Ji-hai had discovered this information. Some humans had identified the habit of meat bats after 8 months. I didn't know about it because I had no interest at all. I recently released the ale snakes, but that was all. From now on, shall we closely follow the meat bats? First we have to identify any danger in the surroundings. Then we will find a colony of meat bats. We need to check if they are heading towards the entrance to eat the bugs. We can't just blindly follow them. Safety-oriented. A situation like this in an adventure certainly wasn't good. Li Ji-hai looked at the remaining people. Find the strength to start moving. I won't go. One of the women declared. It was the woman who first glared at Li Ji-hai. Are you sad? I am sad. Do you want to just sit back and die? It is the same anyway. Li Ji-hai didn't bother anymore. She turned her head. Randolph SSI? It would be much better to move with me. I'll do that. I shrugged and moved slightly, making the two women look uneasy. In this situation, I was the only man left. I'll go as well. In the end, the other woman surrendered and stood up painfully. The remaining woman gave in as well. Her pride and power wasn't comparable to her life. There was only one lamp. She couldn't remain alone in this place in the darkness. Li Ji-hai made sure everyone was prepared and said, "Then let's depart." The area was safe. They returned to their original position to create some safety measures. The first thing was that the surrounding spaces were narrow so they could create traps to notice the creatures. They dug at the ground and placed arrows before loosely covering them with grass, turning them into traps. They were able to relax now. And the next day, they filled their hunger with some snacks and drank water before moving. Their movements were as careful as possible in order to avoid the creatures. The problem was that the geography of the place was completely unfamiliar. They looked closely for a colony of meat bats. Following a colony of meat bats was required in order to escape the dungeon. The first day was a failure. The second day they ran low on food. I checked my watch and verified that it was the second day. Water vapor gathered in their vicinity due to Li Ji-hai's magic. But using it for a long time sharply increased fatigue. And they were also hungry. The food problem was the first thing that needed to be solved. That can be eaten. Li Ji-hai pierced through the neck of an ale snake with a water spear. The two women were shocked. No matter how hungry they were, who would have thought of eating creatures? It looked like a snake, but it was distinctly a creature. A creature that attacked people. Li Ji-hai didn't care. The moisture was removed from many of the grass and branches near them and stones gathered. Give me strength. A fire needed to be kindled. I readily accepted. Friction would cause a fire. My strength and speed meant it was only a few minutes before smoke rose. The peeled snakeskin was raised over the fire. Soon there was a golden smell. Even if the meat was raw, Li Ji-hai would bite it without hesitation. Ice-cold computer power, survival skills, ability to take action and not being bothered by the surroundings. I watched her with a satisfied smile. Really good. This level was enough to pass. Now there is one thing left. The conditions for exiting a dungeon. I waited for it to come. 3 goblins were hit. It was barely manageable, but not all of them were safe. One person was bitten. It was the woman who opposed Li Ji-hai from the beginning. I'm sorry, she was ill. The side was bitten and bacteria seemed to have entered through the wound. She was boiling hot and on the verge of death. Sometimes she would wake up and apologize. It is difficult. Li Ji-hai sighed. They couldn't find any meat bat colonies. The more they delayed, the lower the chances of survival would become. Why, are you going to throw her away? The eyes of the remaining woman shone. It was just like what happened to Park Un-taek. Li Ji-hai wasn't the only one who abandoned him. Everyone here was an accomplice. It was obvious he knew he would die. There was always a possibility that others would be abandoned. Li Ji-hai knew this fact as well. But she shook her head. That's not what I meant. Anyway, it seems like a fever. Let's look at the situation. I will take Randolph Nim with me to gather food. Roles were assigned. I would go with Li Ji-hai to gather things like wild mushrooms and grass. But it was unknown if it would lower the fever. Naturally, it depended on the other person's stamina. A few days later, the only people moving were Li Ji-hai and I. Li Ji-hai bit her nails. The other two women were now complete luggage. The cause was unknown. They might have been infected with an illness. Li Ji-hai couldn't easily make a decision. No matter how cold her personality, she still felt like she had sinned. She would feel it even if those two people lived. There had to be a way, but it felt like she had fallen into a swamp. The colony. I need to look for a way to bring them out as quickly as possible. No, I can't be late. They won't survive a day without water. Take care of the people. No, do. She scratched her head nervously. Maybe it would be an unresolved challenge forever. Her expression cracked as she started looking broken. It was a frustrating moment. I've found you. I finally found you. Li Ji-hai's eyes widened. A man's voice was heard not far away from them. I turned around and one person was standing there. Kim Soo-won, the man that had fled in order to survive. Why was he here now? Li Ji-hai couldn't believe it and asked, "What is going on?" It is a relief. Everyone is alive. The other two people? Captain Yoon Hyuk-soo and Kim In-pil are dead. I barely survived, Kim Soo-won said with an expression of relief. His expression made it seem like he had been through a really hard struggle. He came one step closer. How did you find us? It is a coincidence. I was lost and came across you. I really thank God. Li Ji-hai frowned. Did Kim Soo-won have this type of character? Kim Soo-won was someone with strong self-esteem and bravado. Of course, it had been a few days wandering alone, but to thank God. Her sharp judgment wasn't dead yet. Her reasoning warned her of something. One step. Kim Soo-won approached, but the two collapsed over there. Perhaps? They're not dead. They're fighting a fever. I'm glad they're not dead yet. Phew. Yet, the nuances were grave. This dungeon is too large. It isn't a space where people can endure. One step. Kobolds, goblins, meatbats. I endured it alone. Let's combine forces to resolve this. Wait. Soo-won SSI. Stop. What's wrong? I told you something before entering the dungeon. After escaping the dungeon, you would introduce me to your sister in the hospital. Kim Soo-won nodded like it was natural. Yes, I remember. Will you keep your promise? Haha. Don't worry. I promise to honor it. Water sphere. Water flowed around Li Ji-hai. Kim Soo-won was baffled. Why? The promise you made wasn't with your little sister. It was your little brother. I must have lost my spirit. I've spent too much time alone in the dungeon. Li Ji-hai retreated with dismay. She briefly had a chance to talk to Kim Soo-won before the dungeon. At that time, Kim Soo-won had offered to drive Li Ji-hai. He said he would introduce her to his little brother. But, who would forget the gender? It wasn't a trivial fact. Li Ji-hai made a decision. Don't come any closer. If you take one more step, then I will attack. Tisk. You noticed quickly. Kim Soo-won's posture changed dramatically. He placed a sword to Li Ji-hai's neck. The water sphere impacted with Kim Soo-won's abdomen, but he didn't stop. It was like he didn't feel any pain. The tone, the atmosphere was strange. Kim Soo-won didn't feel like Kim Soo-won. It felt like he would attack no matter what. It was too late for her to regret it. She couldn't avoid Kim Soo-won's sword. She instinctively had a premonition of death. She imagined her neck rolling across the floor. Li Ji-hai closed her eyes. And, you pass. I gave a very satisfied smile. I had been waiting for it. Li Ji-hai's wit to shine. Finally, the last condition was completed. Quack. Kim Soo-won's head fell to the floor. It happened in an instant. Blood splashed everywhere. Li Ji-hai's face was drenched with blood. Li Ji-hai's body was rigidly still in its standing body. It happened so naturally, but it was extremely unrealistic. Someone she thought was a beginner had extremely cold eyes. Her eyes gazed between Kim Soo-won's severed neck and I. I turned away from Lee Ji-hai and looked in the direction Kim Soo-won came from. Until when are you intending to hide like a rat? Come out, Jack JJAK. At the same time, there was the sound of applause in the darkness. The captain and command magician who had been killed appeared. I smiled. This was a real smile. The situation right now was so interesting and satisfying that I couldn't help laughing silently. The captain and command magician Kim In-pil. They were the real masterminds. The plan had been put together by them. Kim In-pil had manipulated Kim Soo-won's body. I had seen the skill proficiency when Kim In-pil commanded 2 goblins. Although it was marginal, I thought that the dead bodies moved more flexibly and seemed to be complemented by the magic. It seems like he only intends to control the goblins this much. Kim In-pil used the manipulated goblin to pull the enemies. The movements wouldn't be so stiff if that was all he intended. From the beginning, his mind had been filled with calculations to deceive people. Humans like this existed. A person that was more like a demon than a human. That's why beginners were accepted and they were softly coaxed deeper into the dungeon. Forcefully marching them without a break and then dispersing them with the attack from a large number of creatures. Consistent from start to finish. So I was convinced that Kim In-pil was coming. He built this plan just to monopolize the cores. His bloodthirst was obvious. I, too, was definitely placed in the category of prey. So I waited obediently. Approaching me with impure intentions was a sin I could never forgive. I originally decided to remove his head straight away but decided to wait when Lee Ji-hai got involved. Thanks to that, I had some fun watching. It was enough compensation for waiting a few days. Did you know from the beginning? Kim In-pil was puzzled by my dark smile. I could smell the stench of a corpse. I shrugged. It wasn't just the smell. The stiff facial expression and strange voice pitch. In addition, there were lots of evidence. Lee Ji-hai was normal and had figured out that Kim Soo-won was a corpse. A great mentality. Your ability to distinguish things is beyond normal. Kim In-pil had a truly surprised expression. It was normal for people to go crazy after being isolated in a cave filled with creatures for days. I was abnormal by human standards. The standards of humans. Why did this? Lee Ji-hai opened her mouth after recovering. Her voice was filled with dismay and perplexity. Kim In-pil spread his arms out wide. A dungeon is a really nice place. Dead people are just buried here. Even the body doesn't leave. It is a place where murder is authorized. On the website that gathered the awakened, the killers stated in the notice were Kim In-pil and Yoon Hyuk-soo. Lee Ji-hai snorted. You are crazy. You made a plan like this just to murder us? Not only murder. He pulled out an old-fashioned notebook. I keep a diary. Records of skill proficiencies and different magic. This diary was also from before I awakened. Each awakened had a weapon to fit them. The diary was filled with Kim In-pil's madness. In a sense, it was a weapon that fit him. The contents of the diary were obvious. In addition, the diary was filled with stories from before he awakened. Murderer? Haha. Correct. In fact, I wasn't an undertaker. Would you believe that I worked part-time at a convenience store when I awakened? Instead, I was famous for another reason in Incheon. My hobby was pulling out the eyeballs of a living person and collecting them. In the midst of the loud Incheon, a few bodies had been found without their eyes. A serial killer that made it into the newspapers of the United States. Lee Ji-hai blocked her ears. She didn't want to believe Kim In-pil's words. My friend here is also a celebrity. He raped women and killed them by breaking their necks. Of course, we are like-minded people. My friend Yoon Hyuk-soo used his tracking skill to chase you. He was really worried that you had died during the chase. Phew, I'm glad. The tracking skill normally used to pursue creatures was used to chase people. Yoon Hyuk-soo bared his teeth. This attack had been planned all along. I accepted beginners for a reason. Exactly, how else would 2 other beginners be accepted? Then Yoon Hyuk-soo disappearing was all an act. It was necessary to draw out Kim Soo-won. He has plenty of experience in dungeons and is something who frantically tries to save his own life. That friend would become anxious once Yoon Hyuk-soo doesn't return. Will you forgive us for the desperate plan? Is that the whole story? Hoo-hoo. If you think that you can beat both of us, please give up that hope. JJIKUK, JJIKUK. Kim Soo-won's head started making a strange sound. Kim Soo-won rose up again. It still carried the smell of a rotten body. Now, the three of us. One of them doesn't tire. We also have decent stamina. Just keep still and you won't die painfully. Speaking unnecessary words, I was no longer interested in listening. At first it was like listening to a joke. But I disliked useless and vain people like this. However, I didn't move. Unlike those guys, Lee Ji-hai had passed the test I made. Of course, if I was alone then passing the test wouldn't matter. I turned my gaze towards Lee Ji-hai. Lee Ji-hai was staring at me. Make a choice. One of them will die and one will live. Pick the one that dies. And what will happen to the one that lives? Randolph Nim, what does that mean? Choose. Lee Ji-hai realized that the atmosphere was unusual. She could feel that I had changed since earlier. She clearly saw Kim Soo-won's head being cut off. And now she was holding the cards. A last frantic attempt. Lee Ji-hai spoke like she was squeezing something out. Kill one of them. Very brutally. Leave one of them alive. We still need to leave the dungeon. Who lives and who dies? I don't know. Just leave one of them alive. Okay. Kill Kim In-pil. Yoon Hyuk-soo, Herm. I will try to save him. I'm asking you. Please. I gave a small laugh. Asking for such a simple favor. The listening Kim In-pil and Yoon Hyuk-soo found out conversation funny. Bravo. You are really a masterpiece. The best. Kim In-pil trembled. Kim In-pil abandoned the honorifics and smiled. I will take the Bugatti Veyron. That car is too good to pass up. Ah, but you should do your best. So that it becomes more fun. Quirk. In the blink of an eye. Kim Soo-won's body standing in front of him was cut in half. And I arrived before Kim In-pil. First I will cut out your tongue. Chuhook. A sword was stuck in Kim In-pil's mouth. Coom. Is it fun to pull out the eyeballs of living people? Thanks to the bonus stats from the title, I had 78 points in strength. A human being with that type of strength couldn't be imagined. I dug my fingers into Kim In-pil's eyes while he was still living. Kiek. Froth flowed from his mouth as Kim In-pil passed out from the pain. A sight that could cause madness. Yoon Hyuk-soo, who was familiar with murder, was unable to move. I even dug out the remaining eyeball before saying dully, "This isn't fun." Although I'm not in a very good mood. Kim In-pil writhed in pain. He had told Lee Ji-hai that his hobby was torturing the person before brutally killing them. Now Kim In-pil was dying painfully slowly. Or, he might even be eaten alive by the creatures. I beheaded Kim Soo-won again while the command magician Kim In-pil had lost his concentration. I wiped the blood on Kim In-pil's clothes and grabbed his diary. I looked at it with mind's eye and realized that Kim In-pil's diary was a very good item. I put the diary away and turned my head. Now it was time to handle the rest of the people. Kang. Yoon Hyuk-soo's sword dropped as soon as my gaze fell on him. He raised both hands. Spare me. This boring fellow. This guy was boring compared to Kim In-pil. I completely lost interest. I pulled my sword from Kim In-pil's mouth and stabbed Yoon Hyuk-soo, dealing damage to his internal organs. Kuik. Yoon Hyuk-soo grabbed that part of his body and moaned. Ooh. Soon Yoon Hyuk-soo looked up at me with lovely resentful eyes. His eyes were asking why I attacked when he surrendered. A human wouldn't know this, but demons were infinitely selfish and would constantly change the laws. Even if he was a murderer, he considered his own life precious. I gazed into Yoon Hyuk-soo's eyes and he quickly lowered his eyes. I spoke in a low voice. Be a guide. Although you will probably die from excessive bleeding, you can live for an extra hour if the sword isn't pulled out. Yoon Hyuk-soo had no options. Chapter 17 to 20. Lightning Queen. The previous evening, a bluish twilight welcomed us. Not bad. I chuckled at the sight of the sunset. The first experience had a variety of things. In the end, the only ones that emerged from the entrance were the three women. Lee Ji-hai and I were carrying the two unconscious women. Yoon Hyuk-soo, he walked with the sword sunk in him. It was possible thanks to his high stamina. But he collapsed right in front of the entrance. His eyes were closed like he was sleeping. Things have been resolved. Shortly after leaving the dungeon, the two women were transferred to the shop operated by the Mithril Guild. They would handle things for a small fee. A place for patients was prepared inside the shop. After emergency first aid was completed, they would be taken to hospital. What will you do now? I asked Li Ji-hai, who was staring at the sky with a blank expression. Work hard. I will do my best to live. Do you still plan to continue participating in raids? She shook the leather pouch filled with cores. Except for selling my body, there isn't any other high-income jobs for a 25-year-old single woman. Somehow I could feel something in her voice. It seemed like she needed money to live a normal life. Anyway, she hadn't abandoned the idea of exploring dungeons. I nodded and asked again. Do you intend to join a guild? Li Ji-hai opened her mouth without thinking. If I can earn money safely, then I will sign up. But the screening of the 5 guilds is choosy. If I can't join them, then is it worth signing up to another guild? 5 famous guilds existed in Korea. Each of them were led by starters, and the reliable raids was the biggest benefit. There are various merits, but it was a big challenge itself joining the business. Li Ji-hai seemed to have applied to all 5 guilds. And failed the steps. It was a pessimistic attitude. I pulled out a business card from your wallet. Take this. A business card? Just mention my name and ask for formal admission. Take it. Li Ji-hai accepted the business card and read the writing in the middle. Heaven's Will. Is there a problem? Heaven's Will was clearly one of the 5 famous guilds. Li Ji-hai shook her head. No. Rather, what is your relationship with the Heaven's Will Guild Master? There is no need to know that. Randolph SSI, tell me honestly, you are a beginner, right? I'll take care of it. I didn't have the slightest intention of explaining. I just let Li Ji-hai imagine whatever she wanted. It didn't matter where her imagination ended up. Li Ji-hai was locked in her thoughts. The scene of Yoon Hyuk-soo and Kim In-pil was haunting her head. Those series of actions wasn't something a beginner could do. Perhaps, Park Eun-taek SSI. Li Ji-hai muttered in a small voice. Park Eun-taek had thrown his body towards the creatures. As a result, they were able to escape. However, didn't he have the ability to easily overpower Yoon Hyuk-soo and Kim In-pil? Then couldn't he leave the dungeon on his own? Li Ji-hai swallowed hard. She should refrain from any speculation. Anyway, it had already happened and she couldn't turn back time. Above all, she couldn't easily deal with the man in front of her. She just imagined it. Li Ji-hai emptied her head. Excellent. I looked at Li Ji-hai with eyes filled with praise. She had the excellent judgment to swallow her words. Her potential was low, but she could be the manager of his raids. A person absolutely can't grasp everything. Anyway, I understand. I will get in contact with them. Li Ji-hai said with a sigh. This was an opportunity for her. It was a solid path to enter one of the 5 guilds. She wouldn't lose a thing even if it was false. But what are you going to do with that diary? I pulled out the diary left behind by Kim In-pil. It was a diary designed in an old-fashioned manner and gave off the scent of mana. I used mind's eye to confirm the details again. Name. Book of Command Spells, U. Description: a demon's book of madness. Those with low intelligence are likely to be infected by the madness. If it is used during hunting, the magic power of the diary will rise depending on the system. The special job, Command Magician, can be inherited. I saw a sneak peek in the dungeon, but it was amazing. A unique rating? In other words, a unique item. The heroes weren't at the level to obtain a rare grade skill or item. That fact that this journal awakened with Kim In-pil was enormous. I wondered why a human had this item and picked it up from Kim In-pil. It also have the ability to inherit a special occupation. It was a unique item at a decent enough level. Kim In-pil had something good. A treasure like this being in the hands of someone with no power was a sin itself. Kim In-pil obtaining something so precious. He must have been a command shaman in a past life. Kim In-pil had died and couldn't keep the treasure anymore. Those without mind's eye wouldn't see the enormous value of the diary and would just think of it as Japtem. I decided to take the diary. I'll take care of it. Burn it if possible. That thing, it must have received a curse. Li Ji-hai shuddered. The eyes that looked at the diary was full of disgust. The experiences she went through in the dungeon had a substantial impact on her. She had replenished the nutrition, but the mental blow would take time to recover. Li Ji-hai's shoulders sagged before she turned and said to me, I will go and try. An unknown beginner? Is this really the business card of Heaven's Will? Go and do that. Oh, I should go home and wash first. I also need to go to the hospital. It is difficult. If it is tough, then I can give you a ride. It's okay. I can't depend on you so much. It is comfortable riding in a taxi. Li Ji-hai laughed and started to descend the mountain. Perhaps the next time I saw her would be at Heaven's Will Guildhouse. I gazed in her direction for a moment before turning back to the dungeon. And I haven't met Yi-hee. She was so busy that she didn't even realize I entered the dungeon. Yi-hee was the spirit of the dungeon core. She was in charge of various affairs in the dungeon and made it less bleak. It was possible to Yi-hee to create characteristics like flowers or a lake on each floor. She is busy. Right now, building the foundation of the dungeon was in full swing, so it must be hectic. I had handed over some points so that she could create necessary things on the 2nd to 4th floors. From the 2nd floor onwards, rare battle gear can be obtained, so I need some precautions. I also left this to Yi-hee. Crafty places were designed to wake up the spirit of the heroes. It should be proceeding steadily right now. I have to go back. The suit was heavy. I didn't think I would have to wear it in the dungeon for so long. I hit my neck several times before lightly jogging. South Korea was noisy. It had been 9 months since the dungeons appeared. The first guild to break through to the 2nd floor of the dungeon appeared. Heaven's Will. The guild master, who was a starter, Kim Yong-woo. Those 3 characters were spread all over various video and print media. The public television channel, QBS, used a vast amount of funds to get an exclusive interview with Kim Yong-woo. A famous announcer would only get 10 minutes of interview time, but it caused an explosive sensation in South Korea. The contents of the interview were as followed. Guild Master of Heaven's Will, I'm sure many people are wondering about Kim Yong-woo SSI. Please give a short self-introduction. Nice to meet you. I am the Guild Master of Heaven's Will, Kim Yong-woo. As you know, I am an awakened and one of the starters. I am 28 years old. Single. Thank you for the answer. Then I will quickly jump onto the next question. The dungeons and awakened are the hottest thing this year. Does Kim Yong-woo SSI have any idea have this? The dungeon is obviously a dangerous place. China and the Philippines have suffered significant damage from the monster waves. But as long as the awakened are present, the creatures can't run rampant. When looking at our occupation status window, I think our role is to get rid of the devil that exists at the top of the dungeons. Devil? Are you talking about the devil with 2 horns? Haha, that is everybody's imagination. Actually, I don't know what it is. There might be a real god, aliens or humans from an underground world. I can't possibly imagine it. Now, this is the next question. Recently, the popularity of the awakened in the entertainment industry is soaring high into the sky. How do you see this? A good phenomenon. The awakened are still people. We suddenly went through a change, but we still have emotions. I hope you look at us without any discrimination. I understand. Then I will finally get down to business. 12 people have succeeded in capturing the 1st floor? They are the elite 12 members of my guild, so capturing the 1st floor with a strategy wasn't that difficult. It was more difficult finding a way. We spent a whole week finding the path to the 2nd floor. Amazing. I know how scary the creatures in the dungeons are from looking at the videos. They are horrible looking and cruel, so it is unbelievable that you can easily hunt them. Are there many differences between the 1st and 2nd floor? Orcs appear. The size is 1.5 times larger and it has the nose of a pig. The thick muscles and tough leather means that we almost died several times. Other than that, treasures are hidden all over the place. A scroll that allows you to jump 500 meters at once. A leather pouch that allows items twice the size to enter. Potions 10 times more effective than grinding up cores. A sword with a rare rating. That is all on the 2nd floor. Wow, the descriptions are really eye-opening. Does that mean the 2nd floor is a treasure trove? It could be seen that way. But we have to be careful. The orcs are really scary. They frightened me during my encounters with them. If I met them alone, then I would instantly flee. The creatures are so ugly that I don't even want to see them in my dreams. Heaven's Will Guild Master Kim Yong-woo, can you please say one final thing? Don't panic if you one day awaken. I hope you think of it as a blessing. And there is a chance for everyone to receive a blessing. We are the protectors of humanity and also contribute to humanity's development. The dungeon is a very dangerous place, but humanity can use the knowledge to take on step further. It is over. The video went up on YouTube and the interview spread all over the world. It achieved 300 million views and foreign news media aired it with subtitles. The thought of treasure being found in the dungeon in South Korea naturally made people go crazy. Due to this, South Korea became even more aware of the awakened. They were looked upon very favorable, except for the sports industry. Heroes, the guardians of humanity. The power of those words was beyond imagination. The cores were used to cure some terminally ill patients and was successful in giving the awakened a good image. There were also devices that utilized the actual core, and there were heated debates about the importance of the awakened. Foreign celebrities were among the travelers heading towards South Korea. The only thing on their mind were the treasures unearthed in South Korea. Korea became the subject of the world's interest. At its heart was heaven's will. And behind that, a man by the name of Randolph Briggseel. There was a strange atmosphere during the meeting at the Guild House of Heaven's Will. A total of 45 people were staring blankly at the man at the entrance. There was silence for a while. Even the sound of saliva being swallowed died. There was tension in their faces. 1 second felt like an eternity. The man moved. The man that held the room's attention opened the door to the guild master's room. After a while, the silence was broken. They could barely keep their senses. My house, my house. I can't lose my composure. What is his identity? Just because he succeeded in the raid. Anyone could, this dirty South Korea. Little by little, there was the sound of complaints. Most of them were from people that just joined the guild. They dreamed of going on a formal raid, but the guild chose depending on their performance so far. Sunbae Nim. Is that guy really that good? Eventually, one of the new members couldn't tolerate it any longer and asked a muscular man sharpening his weapon. He was one of the 12 elite members that attacked the first floor in Heaven's Will. How many times have I told you? He is someone who defeated the orcs. If it wasn't for him, then we would have been wiped out. I can't believe it. He doesn't look like it. The muscular man frowned. I assure you, no one here can beat the orcs in a one-on-one fight. That man did it. He took on 2 to 5 of them alone. Does that mean even Sunbae Nim can't win against the orcs? The orcs are enemies that protagonists in fantasy novels often face. The kobolds and goblins aren't their opponent. I would lose 8 out of 10 times if I fought them. The people who heard it couldn't believe it. The muscular man was considered as the top 5 powerhouses in the guild. Yet he said that he could only win 2 out of 10 times. They still weren't convinced that the orcs were so strong. All members of the guild wanted to participate in the first floor invasion. They had quietly waited for the top members of the guild to get some results. But among them, a man they didn't know had participated in the raid. He didn't participate in any guild meetings, so their nerves were scratched when he appeared. Of course, the man was well known within the guild. They were aware that the guild master had gifted him with a Bugatti Veyron. In contrast to their snobbish words, each one of them felt their spirit being crushed in front of a giant and felt a crushing pain in their stomach. No matter how proficient they were, they had never seen something like him. The man proved his skills to the 11 people participating in the raid. And they kept repeating, excellent and strong, in regards to him. Even an orc was no match. It was no wonder there were complaints. Skills are secondary. Is he making a personal raid group within the dungeon? He brought in a female manager and a woman cleaning the toilers. Rather than a raid group, it is like he wants to create a flower garden. There was another problem. The guild gathered the optimal personnel as needed to form raid groups. Now the man was creating a raid group with fixed members of the guild. Making a raid group would create a fuss. The separation of powers would affect the guild. The guild members wouldn't just belong to the guild anymore. They could refuse the guild master's commands and only move according to the direction of the raid captain. There were many members that made a fuss. Lee Ji-hai had been brought in as an outside manager. And he had taken a newly entered girl away. The guild's new hire that had only been there for a month was snatched away like a falling fruit. The man's behavior was just making a mockery of the guild's traditions. Thus there was talk that he planned to make his raid group a flower garden. And the crucial cause of this turmoil, the fact that both women were beauties, was to blame. The muscular man stopped polishing his weapon and clicked his tongue. The leader has given his approval. We are not a mere guild. I want to hear your thoughts. This might not be a bad thing for the guild. He definitely has the skills. A skill with the rare rating is definitely worth investing in. I also believe in the results he has produced so far. If Sunbae Nim says so. Ihyo. The guild members sighed as the muscular man shrugged. Think about it. We've cleared the first floor and established ourselves as South Korea's #1 guild. That means you will get benefits. The dungeons have appeared for 8 months and now you will have some opportunities to play. Why are baby chicks acting so impatient? There were standard requirements. A much smaller number of monsters now existed on the first floor of the dungeon. Information arrived that they were disappearing here and there. The reliability was 99.9%. It was good news. Our chance has come? All the guild members hoped to explore the second floor of the dungeon. They didn't think the chance would come easily. The personnel who participated in the raid all received tremendous rewards. The various treasures found on the second floor transcended the rewards received by killing the creatures on the first floor. The muscular man smiled. In the near future, 3 raid groups filled with 12 people each will be formed to explore the second floor. It was originally scheduled to be announced a week later, but it should be okay for me to tell you this. Hyuk, really? 36 people would be mobilized for 3 raids filled with 12 people. All the people who heard the story had wide eyes. The muscular man turned his head and calmly said to everyone who was listening to the story. So raise your skills. I'm saying this to all of you. Life is a battle. If something goes wrong, then it will end at once. If you want to gain some achievements, then build up your skills. In that sense, do you want to participate in a 10-day special training? Flash. Hands started to move like lightning. Me, I'd like that very much. Special training. The muscular man's eyes shone. Express hell training. You can't mess around. If you're not good enough, then you will die. Do you still want to go? It was like cold water had been poured on a wildfire. Hell training. He aimed to show them the real hell. Those who want to go, follow me. The muscular man stood up with his weapon. He was one of the 12 members who participated in the raid with Randolph Briggseel. He was convinced that only the strong could live in the future. He had been moving at a lukewarm pace. Continuing to the second and third floor of the dungeon. He didn't stand a chance with his state right now. I've been too complacent with my skills. It has been a few months at best. An example of the strong becoming lazy. But there was a strong man in the guild he wanted to follow. A wall. And he would go beyond that wall. Hoo-hoo. The muscular man. Kim Tae-won. He was a man who would laugh while jumping into hellfire. The outside is quite noisy. I said to Kim Yong-woo after hearing the noise outside from the sealed room. Kim Yong-woo just laughed while rating my proposal about establishing a raid group. There are multiple times when they are noisy. Thanks to Randolph Nim clearing the first floor, you are now a perfect target. The time of your proposal? A festival. There were no festivals in the demon world. They divided the spoils of victory and enjoyed the atmosphere, but they didn't have any idea of the concept itself. In that sense, a human festival was very lively. Are you interested? In fact, I would have rented a huge hall sooner or later. It is pretty fun. Despite being a miser, Kim Yong-woo wrote something down. He was using his position as a guild master. I shook my head. That's okay. Rather, just make sure that there is no problem with the proposal passing. Kim Yong-woo scanned it and roughly shook his head. You don't want it formally? Still, it is good to get things straight. There is no problem with the proposal itself. I've already heard about an independent raid group that only focuses on attacking dungeons. It was the first time I submitted official documents, but the story of the raid I was creating had already spread through the guild. The speed at which the issue spread through the guild had spread beyond imagination. Kim Yong-woo looked at the proposal and muttered. The raid name, Devil Hunters. Somehow it reminds me of the Black Flame Dragon. Devil Hunters. The name of the raid group would be reduced to DH. The name was a reminder of my goal to get rid of all the demons in the dungeons and to become the devil. There shouldn't be any changes. I think it looks great. Should I seal it now? Kim Yong-woo, who had his attitude changed, asked him. I nodded and Kim Yong-woo immediately stamped the proposal. This was the moment that the raid group Devil Hunters was launched. How are you going to fill the other group? 1 manager and 1 new member. You are walking down a very hard path. Wouldn't it help to recruit more influential people? Right now I was thinking about the future of the raid group. I intended to make the strongest raid group but had only found one appropriate person for it. My methods will take a bit of time, but I am confident they will become the strong raid group. It won't be bad from the guild master's position. It wasn't bad for a guild to have many strong members. Kim Yong-woo handed the proposal to me. I'm at your disposal. I am Randolph Nim's faithful servant. I will follow Master Nim. I never expected this when I rescued you. It was really surprising. I had been wandering the dungeon when I came across Kim Yong-woo and decided to help him. I hadn't hoped for something like this. Kim Yong-woo just grinned. Studying and social experience, I just used every chance I received to do well. Isn't it thanks to Master Nim that I broke through the first floor? I don't think my choice was wrong this time. Kim Yong-woo. He thought he was an elephant, but he realized that he was lower than an ant. Instead, he decided to stand next to the elephant. This was the secret of his life. Otherwise he wouldn't have become the guild leader of one of Korea's top 5 guilds. I received the proposal and said, as long as you're not pretending in order to stab me in the back, I will help you. I hope you made the right choice. Ah, don't say that even as a joke. Kim Yong-woo waved both his hands. Only you know whether it is a joke or not. I gave him advice just in case he was prepared to betray me. It was in order to properly scare him. I turned my body. The proposal was stamped, so now I was going to plan my raid group. Will you participate in the festival? Kim Yong-woo asked before I opened the door. I will make a decision at the time. Then I will send you the official documents when the schedule has been determined. Thank you. It is natural. Kim Yong-woo's eyes blazed with his loyalty. I ignored him and opened the door of the room. This time I will participate. I wasn't very interested in a human festival, but not participating would cause discord within the guild. I didn't care, but there was a need to create an amicable relationship. In order to be a member of Heavenswell, I needed to participate in a minimum amount of activities. I was aware that the other side had no flexibility. I need to slowly build the foundation. The creation of my own raid group. The most urgent thing was to collect all the members. This time, the new member known as the Lightning Queen in my previous life appeared in my head and a warm smile appeared. The spacious hall on the guildhouse's 3rd floor. It was the space given to the Devil Hunters raid group. It was a wide area for only 3 people, but it would become narrow once the positions started to fill up. There was no furniture and I felt a strange tension as I entered the empty hall. The manager Lee Ji-hai and newly recruited member Yoon-hai were in a standoff. Stiff expressions were on their faces. I slowly opened up. What's going on? Lee Ji-hai confirmed my presence and said, Captain Nim, you shouldn't pick her. Uni, wasn't it just a mistake? It couldn't be helped. Have you accidentally killed someone? I'm sorry, but you're not dead. It was indeed a meaningful conversation. Lee Ji-hai seemed to be acting unfair towards Yoon-hai. I looked over their appearances and nodded. There was a faint burning smell from Lee Ji-hai's hair, so I could guess the reason. It is due to Yoon-hai's passive. In my previous life, Yoon-hai had been called Lightning Queen. She had a young appearance like a student, and the bob cut and mischievous eyes gave him an impressive appearance. However, she was afflicted with some type of passive. I use mind's eye to take a deep look at Yoon-hai's status window. Name: Yoon-hai. Occupation: Hero, Lightning Magician. Title: dozen lightning strikes. R. Magic power +4. Stats: Strength 20, Intelligence 44, Agility 15, Stamina 14, Magic power 45, +4. Potential: 138 423. Uniqueness: has received the protection of the Spirit of Lightning. A state received after being hit by lightning and standing on the door between life and death. Skill: Lightning Bolt, N. Electric Current, N. Passive. It was a truly strange status window. Her potential was outstanding. The owner of the highest potential I had seen until now. It was comparable to Timely Rain's guildmaster, Alan. The problem was the uniqueness. It was the part about receiving the protection of a lightning spirit. Perhaps due to the lightning spirit, her body acted as a big lightning rod. If lightning struck, then it would directly hit her. As a result, she even received a title. She might suffer a bit, but it wasn't bad. There were many toxins and waste running through the body. The owner of this talent could be called a genius, but the passive electric current is the problem. The lightning had a comfortable place and wandered inside the building. She unknowingly spread this aura everywhere she went. This was the reason why Li Ji-hai's hair was burnt. Don't come any closer. If you take one more step then I will attack. Li Ji-hai warned. She didn't want to attack the enemy but she needed extreme patience to endure the charred hairs. Yu Un-hai had a long face. Uni's hair was so beautiful that I inadvertently touched it. But my passive was activated. Uni, we are Hai sisters. Huh? I won't do it again. Li Ji-hai and Yu Un-hai. Both of them had names that ended in Hai. People should overlook a small mistake. But Li Ji-hai had no intention of forgiving her. We are not sisters. How can you call me Uni when you burned my hair? Don't you think it looks good? No, I'm kidding. So don't be like that. Sometimes I just joke around for fun. I'm sorry Uni. You, stop. I finally spoke. I needed to control the situation. Emotions shouldn't consume you in a raid group. Li Ji-hai held out her burnt hair and whined. But, BFIA Roy JDSAODKLNA. I told you to stop. I firmly said. The Devil Hunters raid group had been formally launched so I needed to discipline them. I was the leader of the raid group and Li Ji-hai and Yu Un-hai were only members. The atmosphere was heavy as Li Ji-hai closed her mouth. You are the only manager of Devil Hunters. Your job is to check the status of the members and to organize the schedules, such as when we take a job overseas. Don't disappoint me from the start. I'm sorry. Li Ji-hai bowed her head. She was a bit confused at first but she realized something after coming to Heaven's will. A man that even the guild master listened to. An overwhelming amount of charisma flowed from him. The man talked strangely but it was hard to reject him. He gave off a strong impression. It was the first time she met a guy like this. A person like that made her the manager. She couldn't disappoint him from the beginning. Saying it one time is enough. I was strong compared to humans. And Li Ji-hai was a wise woman. It wasn't necessary to repeat it. I decided to stop my harsh words at this point. I pulled out a small vial and handed it to Li Ji-hai. Take this. It will solve the problem of your hair. Li Ji-hai's eyes blinked as she took the vial. What is it? A potion I obtained in the dungeon. It is much more effective than grinding a core up. Ah, Li Ji-hai's expression seemed like she had been slapped. Simply grinding a core into a potion couldn't revive dead cells. However, it was a different story if it was one of the treasures obtained. Li Ji-hai moved her shoulders and freaked out. I can't receive this. If this is a treasure from the dungeon. If you don't take it then I will throw it out. Yes, like I said, for me, this is an item that I don't need. My body wasn't weak enough to need an inferior potion like this. A wound on my body would need an advanced potion to cure. Li Ji-hai seemed really moved as she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Thank you. I will treasure it. I inwardly shook my head. I didn't understand the uproar over a little bit of burned hair. However, I heard that hair was important to women. In particular, women invested a lot into maintaining long, straight hair. Perhaps hair was even more important than their lives. Thus Li Ji-hai's attitude was natural. See Captain Nim? Yu Un-hai, who was watching the scene, asked. What am I doing here? Cleaning? The laundry? Why do you think that? Well, hee. I'm not doing something like that. There is no need to. You are different from those people. I had no intention of giving up such a critical power. Yu Un-hai was confused that she wouldn't be cleaning and asked. Then what am I doing? Ah, rubbing your shoulders? My hands are amazing. Perhaps you might become addicted to it? Then tragedy would occur when her passive was activated. Based on her kindness, Yu Un-hai somehow reminded him of Yi. Yi would probably scold him angrily if she heard his thoughts. You seem to be misunderstanding something. Did you think I brought you here to run errands? The sullen Yu Un-hai closed her mouth. I'm honestly not sure. Do you know what my nickname is? Human Lightning Rod. I've been struck by lightning a number of times. My body even lets out electric currents. Do you know how much disruption and damage I cause to the area? Of course, I know I have a pretty face but Captain Nim is unlikely to bring me for that reason. Yu Un-hai, who was in charge of chores, had suddenly become involved in Devil Hunters. That was 3 days ago. Yu Un-hai had been worrying about it for 3 days. Just have confidence in yourself. That is to say, yes. Sometimes I think that people don't see me as a woman. You are amazing. I have high expectations for you. Expectations? Yes. Show all the people of heavens will how excellent you are. Hee hee. I will burn them. It feels nice. This is the first time someone had expectations from me. Still, I'm sorry. You are probably going to be disappointed. Yu Un-hai laughed. From an early age, no one ever had any expectations for her. Many people were scared of her and wouldn't come close. She was struck by lightning and visited a shaman, but the shaman just proclaimed, "This is karma from a previous life. Build up your virtue." Even her family and relatives were unnerved and saw her as a burden. Yu Un-hai was delighted when she awakened. She could finally be called a talent. However, the passive electric current flowing through her body brought her back to despair. It is serious. If Yu Un-hai was useless, then the vast majority of humanity was less than trash. The flower hadn't blossomed yet, but I need to fix that mentality. I should make a move. Her thoughts were full of self-deprecation. If that continued, it was natural for her health to fade. Furthermore, Yu Un-hai was a magician, not a warrior. All her abilities were focused in intelligence and magic power, not the physical traits of a tough warrior. The door between life and death. In the past, she learned some knowledge while dealing with tough opponents. I didn't personally experience how great she was. It would be a shame to waste that talent. In the past, Yu Un-hai didn't fully understand her talent or ability as a magician. Of course, I had no intention of letting the past life repeat itself. Leaving this neglected would be a sin. If Yu Un-hai was perfectly raised, then she could ride the lightning and aim it at enemies. In order to do this, she needed to increase her physical skills through training. Right now her state was too imbalanced. Follow me. I will be starting your training from today. I exited the hall. This is the dungeon? Yu Un-hai said as she looked at the entrance that seemed like the giant mouth of a lion. Haven't you seen a dungeon before? Of course it was a dungeon. Yu Un-hai had a horrified look on her face. We are just two people. I am a raid captain and can deal with them. You might be a raid captain, but I'm not strong. How many times have I seen the dungeon? I replied like it was no big deal. Is that so? Don't worry. From now on you will see it a lot. Yu Un-hai felt like crying. That wasn't what she meant. What if I don't want to? Ignoring my words? No, I will keep it in mind. It was like a situation where I heard a confession. Then why? Do you think you will die here? I won't let that happen. Don't tell me we really came here for training? A dungeon? Yes. Oh my god. Unbelievable. Yu Un-hai felt dismay. An influential leader. However, he was the only capable one. Perhaps she would be a burden. Don't use any magic. You can only deal with the creatures with your sword. Huh? A sword? You want me to use a sword? Is Captain Nim well? Yu Un-hai was currently carrying a longsword. She thought she was just carrying the weapon for him. It was enough to make her curse. That's right, you have to use the sword. The confirmation killed her. Yu Un-hai's body shook. While Yu Un-hai was crying silently, I looked at my plans for the future. While the demons were using the training room to get stronger, the awakened were also experiencing noticeable growth. Killing creatures or completing quests would cause them to grow. It might be doubted because it couldn't be seen, but experience was always been gained. I could see it rise with mind's eye. The potential opening, and the way the abilities rose depending on their actions. Using a sword against the creatures would have a higher chance of physical abilities rising. It is best to raise the abilities evenly. Let's imagine that a magician had 100 intelligence, 100 magic power and 30 points for everything else. Obviously their body would explode from an enormous hit from a creature. There were constraints on using magic successively. Magic wasn't that easy to use. A double-edged sword, a power that could cause miracles but also rebound on the user. In the end I entered. Yu Un-hai muttered as she stumbled after me into the dungeon. Signs of anxiety were clearly evident. She was so scared from the beginning that she couldn't open her mouth any longer. Don't worry, you aren't going to die in a place like this. It was sincere. Yu Un-hai's level of talent was a frontrunner in the world. In my previous life, she had raised her level to being one of the 10 strongest humans. Unless she encountered a duke traveling in my dungeon, she could kill anything in here. I will believe in Captain Nim. The desire for survival emerged in Yu Un-hai's eyes. I just laughed. The story about how I dealt with the orcs on the second floor of the dungeon was famous within the guild. It was funny that the master of the goblins and kobolds couldn't handle them. Yu Hai followed without saying anything. Finish off the 2 kobolds that are coming. Hyok, get ready to fight, but once again, you shouldn't use magic. I will try. Her tone changed. It will filled with tension. Yu Hai had been to dungeons several times. Despite not killing a lot of creatures, her high intelligence meant she could recover from panic. She wouldn't give up easily. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. Yu Hai hypnotized herself. She sincerely wanted to live up to my expectations. She also wanted to prove to herself that she wasn't useless. It was a good thing. If she continued being frightened by the creatures, then I would have been disappointed. It was important to have the will to fight. They're coming, I said in a low voice. You're Haujisklan Fadmed. I will deal with 1 kobold. And the remaining one is up to you, Yu Hai. Yes, yep, Kiek. The 2 kobolds could smell that prey was present and hurried. I reached out and a sword appeared out of thin air. It was a magic sword with a rare rating that I used 20,000 points to purchase. A weapon had been necessary to handle the higher-ranked creatures summoned during the beginner's protection period. The appearance was different from an ordinary long sword. However, it issued a very sharp light in the darkness. I grasped the sword lightly and said while looking at the kobolds approaching. The kobold has similar strength to you. Don't use straightforward attacks. Just like the goblins, be careful of their nails and teeth. I demonstrated for Yu Hai. I moved as slowly as possible and showed her some normal moves. Keek. The kobolds barely reached my chest. The location was a little low to handle with a sword, but there were little tricks that could kill them. Duck. I kicked the ground. Dust rose up. JGAHDFJ Kadskjadnadisk. The 2 kobolds hesitated for a moment. I pierced the kobold's forehead in that moment. They are short-sighted. Their eyes aren't good. Thus, they will briefly panic when there is smoke. In the meantime, use that chance to attack the head. It is best to cut off their heads. At the same time, I removed my sword from the forehead and cut the neck. 1 kobold was perfectly handled in a moment. Now it is your turn. Kiek. The remaining creature went berserk. Its 2 eyes turned red and it kept snorting. It had a furious appearance. Gulp. Yu Hai barely maintained her spirit. She was barely holding herself together. I stepped back. I didn't attack it, so the aggro wasn't on me. Naturally, the kobold would aim at the target closest to it. You aren't going to die. But I won't act as your guardian. I would stay in the background until Yu Hai's life was in danger. Handling the creature alone would greatly increase her stats. Pushing herself to the limit would raise all her abilities. She needed to cross the wall. But she needed to climb it alone. Yu Hai was now facing her first wall. Whoop! Yu Hai took a deep breath and moved her feet like I did. Dust went everywhere. The kobold hesitated. It was only for 0.5 seconds, but Yu Hai didn't miss the gap. Bam! But it was shallow. The sword barely pierced the skin of the kobold. Yu Hai hastily pulled out her sword and moved it to the neck. At that moment, the kobold raised its hand. It was a posture to catch the attack and allowed it to keep its neck. Instead, the arm it lifted flew. Ah! Yu Hai cried out in a sad voice as her blow was blocked. She cut its arm instead of its neck. What was she supposed to do now? Finally she turned and looked at me. But she didn't put down her sword. No, her high intelligence meant she could find a resolution. She also had a strong supporter. Yu Hai looked at the kobold. The kobold was in pain from one of its arms being cut off. Its behavior was noticeable. Yu Hai felt some hope after seeing its status. Again, she raised the sword up high. She lacked the strength to pierce through the thick leather. That's why she used a strike with all her power. Bam! Bam! The sound of the sword hitting flesh could be heard with every swing. Soon the cries of the kobold stopped and it became silent. Hawk! Hawk! Tiong! Yu Hai threw the sword to the ground. She sat on the floor and breathed harshly. She only fought for 2 to 3 minutes, but sweat was pouring down. The body of the kobold was completely unrecognizable. Well done. I smiled with satisfaction. I knew she had thought of giving up when the kobold blocked the second attack to the neck. Because I didn't tell her what to do if it was blocked. But Yu Hai overcame the crisis by herself. The wall had cracked. That's why I was satisfied. I pulled out a handkerchief prepared in advance that Yu Un-hai used to wipe off the blood. A potion was also used to heal any wounds. The passive electric current attacked my body, but I didn't care. Yu Un-hai watched her wounds being healed with a blank stare before asking me. Did I do it correctly, Captain Nim? Yes. It was admirable. At first she hadn't thought it was possible. But in the end, she did it alone. Yu Un-hai's body trembled as she was inspired. A great performance in front of the captain. Normally her passive skill put captains off from accepting her as a member. The cores also needed to be divided after the hunt was over. Now there was no need to do that. She could handle one kobold alone. Yu Un-hai didn't want to lose this feeling. To Yu Un-hai, who had lived most of her life with a sense of defeat, this feeling was more precious than anything else. If you want, then we can stop here today, I said. I deemed that this was sufficient for the first day. She followed me pretty well and I was pleased with her performance. But Yu Un-hai shook her head. It's nothing. I am able to do more. I think I can. Is it really okay? Yes. Then don't lose that willpower. Willpower was very important, a commitment that she wouldn't stop. Not bad. Yu Un-hai had been scared in her previous life. She wanted to prevent any danger to her body. Safety-oriented behaviors were soaked into her body. But now Yu Un-hai was different. The blood of the warrior inside her had woken up. She would grow wonderfully in the direction I set. Soon she won't have to work to control the lightning in her body. I looked at Yu Un-hai with shining eyes. There was a sufficient amount of time. Now I had to check her willpower. She came here on a forced march, but now it was different. Lightning Queen. The name of a magician who handled lightning in her previous life. This time she would be lightning.